All right, welcome back to another great episode, a super great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the city of fucking dead. That's right, just straight up dead this week. Why? Because it's Halloween this week in 2 days. Not even 48 hours from now. 48 hours from now, as a matter of fact, while I should be giving away candy to the kids, I'll be here while there'll be a bowl with candy out for the kids out there. Now, we have for you a great show. I could have think of no one better for this week. I wanted him to work out for Halloween night. I made that decision a little too late, but then it turns out he had his own thing committed. So, what better day than to bring him on right before the Halloween show, making this a good Halloween special. I bring you the one and only Dark Waters. Dark Waters, welcome back, dear friend.
What's up, brother? How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I see the chat's going great. And I did mention first, I was going to tell you on air. I'll say it on air real quick. And I'll let you respond on air. I was reading in here a comment. This is from Manuel Silva, giving me a shout out back to you, brother. And Manuel Silva wants us to ask you about the dogmen in Angeles Crest. There were a few reports here in 20 off the 210 freeway, which is right off here in Los Angeles, goes east and west. I think 2015 is the year. No, it doesn't even say the year. No, it might even be more recently. Do you know anything about Dogman here in California, Southern California?
Uh, I haven't heard anything recently about dogmen in Southern California. The only thing I've heard about is the gigantic Black Panthers that are there. But no, nothing on in Angeles Crest whatsoever. There may have been a story that I heard from somewhere about one crossing the road. But nothing where was anything that really kind of like stuck in my memory or stuck with me. So no, I don't have anything about that.
Okay, well, we addressed it. Now I'm going to turn it to you and let's just bring the fucking fire. Scare the shit out of me and everyone else.
It just depends on what topic we're going to start with. I can
Well,
kind of
let
get
me tell
into.
you one thing, first of all. I started out as a UFO show, and then, of course, I went and did pretty much anything I wanted to talk about. So, whether it be Roger Stone or assistant to Donald President Trump, whether it be James or Jerome Corsi, whether it be Governor Jesse Ventura, or whether it going to be the ghost people, the ghost adventures, the ghost scientists, or science hunters, whatever you want to call them. There's all sorts of names. I know there's two major programs out there. The point is, I cover everything, but when I was asked, and this is the same answer I always give, what would scare me more, a ghost or meeting an alien? I honestly think meeting a ghost would scare the shit out of me far more than an alien. So, say the movie like The Fourth Kind doesn't scare me as much if that was real than, say, Paranormal Activity. Even the worst one of those, if that was really happening to me. And we have had some people on this show that it's happened to, especially Keith Linder. You might know him.
Right. I know,
Demons in
Keith.
Seattle? Yeah, fascinating case. So to me, that's the shit that scares me.
Well, I tell you, it's so much stuff that we can go into. It just depends on how deep down the rabbit hole we you want to go. But I guess I'll start with one of the more scarier stories that I've been told recently. And I don't know if I told you this, but I spent a significant amount of time in two cities outside of New Orleans. One of them is Dallas, and the other one is in Florida, in Destin, Florida. So those are the two cities that I spent a significant amount of time in outside when I'm outside of New Orleans. And I started getting stories in Dallas, and one in particular that was extremely scary. And I got it through this gay couple that I met, and I'm really cool with them. And then their next door neighbor, I meet the neighbors, and then we start talking about paranormal. And he was like, "Well, James is into, telling paranormal stories." They kind of start looking at me weird and crazy. And when when I start telling people what I do, you only get two reactions. One is like, "Oh crap, I've had something crazy happen," or the other one is, "You're crazy." So I'm thinking these people are leaning in the direction of saying that I'm crazy when they start saying, "Well, we want to tell you our story about the faceless man." And I'm like,
Ooh,
"Okay."
I like that.
And so they start telling me about how the same condos that we were in when they were telling me the story, literally we in this condo. It's like when we first moved in here, we were the only two people that moved in. Like, and it's 8 units. And the way the units are set up is they are like you drive in down this driveway, and then there are four garages on the left hand side, four garages on the right hand side. You pull in your garage, go through the door, go into the kitchen, and there's a living room, dining room. You go upstairs to all the bedrooms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they move in first. The first night they move in, um, at about 2:30 in the morning, they hear what sounds like someone beating on one of the garage doors further down
Ooh.
from them because they're the last unit on the left. If you can imagine standing in a long driveway, four garage doors on your right, four garage doors on your left, and on the far end of the left is where they are. They hear this loud banging on the garage doors. Husband gets up, tries to look out of the window, but he can't see, and then all he sees is a shadow downstairs. Nothing else happens for a couple of days.
Shadow. Oh shit. You know what? Shadow people really scare me.
Oh no, they do. And so nothing happens for a couple of days. I mean, actually, a couple of weeks. People start moving in. The place start taking on a life of its own. And they start, it starts getting occupied. More and more people buying the condos, but no one bought the last one on the right hand side, which was directly across from them. So, it's one evening. He's going to take out the trash, and he had to walk out down to the dumpster to put the trash out. He walks by his neighbor's garage door, which is the two gay guys that I'm cool with, and one of them's digging in the trunk, and he startles him. And so Johnny turns around and he's like, "Oh man, you scared me." And Johnny was the one that actually saw this thing in the window first. All right, so Johnny looks up, he sees this figure in that window of that unoccupied unit. Pause. Let me go back and explain a little bit more because I'm leaving a small part out. That same day, that was in the evening time. That same day, they had an open house, and you know how the realtors have the open houses where realtors kind of walk people through and come in. And so, what they were explaining to me is that during that open house, towards
Mm-hmm.
the end of the evening, they had this really, really heavy set black realtor that was working the property. And so they were all kind of in their garages talking back and forth. And they noticed that this chick comes running out of the unit, like full speed, running out of unit, boobs bobbing everywhere, just flying. She hops in her Mercedes Benz and backs out and just leaves. Like she barely closes the door and leaves. And that was the first time they saw this kind of shadowy figure upstairs in the window of that unit. She left all the lights on. Everything was just, she pretty much just left. You know what I'm saying? That evening, after she left, is when they're taking out the trash and they end up looking up in the window and can clearly see this faceless, grayish, kind of blackish figure, but it's gray with these kind of black lines through it. The way they described it to me was like it's like it had veins, but it didn't run like human veins would run. Like how our veins run around our central nervous system, so they run down your arms, they run down your legs,
Legs, yeah, yeah.
it'll run
Even
through your
down our
chest.
neck, right? The sides of our
Right.
neck, connecting our
But
brain
these
to the
veins,
heart. Yeah.
but the way they say these veins ran with Dave, these veins ran like they ran around the body, like it was wrapped, like they wrapped around the body forward and then down straight into a line going straight down.
Whoa.
But it was standing there and it had no face and it kind of just looking. And I said, well, when you said, and I said, Johnny, and I've hung out with this guy a lot. Johnny, when you say no face, what do you mean? He's like, no, James, you could see muscle, like you could see bone structure, but you couldn't see eyes, ears, nose, mouth. It's like you could clearly see that it had like cheekbones under it, but you couldn't see anything else. And I was like, well, you sure it wasn't like a guy pulling a prank in a mask or anything like that? And he was like, nah, that wasn't what it was. It was something faceless. So
Would you call it something closer to, say, maybe a demon or ghost or something that like a dog man that lives on this earth but maybe on a different plane, or something literally not of this world? from this
In turn,
dimension, but maybe coming from another place, maybe another timeline or another solar system, etc.
no, it turns out that this thing was demonic. Was they ended up having a witch come over to try and get rid of it, and when she went over to the unit to try and exorcise this thing,
Hmm.
they started hearing these growls and these screams, and the lights inside the unit started flickering on and off. And she ended up telling them that during the construction, that somebody went into that particular unit and did a ritual that opened up a portal that allowed demons to actually come into that particular unit.
Hmm.
Um, from there, she went in and closed that portal. And some of this stuff, I told this story on my website, but I didn't give all the details. I didn't give all of this, but she actually went into that unit, closed the portal, and then within 6 months of her closing that portal, this family moves in. They had a newborn baby, and so she still goes over there and hangs out with them. And when they have their little kind of group barbecue, she's there.
Hmm.
And I spoke with her and I said, well, why do people do stuff like that? And she was like, well, James, there's a lot of people who are into magic who are just filthy, dirty people and they want to hurt people. And I was like, wow. And so had she not done that, and this was the question I asked her, I said, had you not cleansed that place? Because that's the word she didn't call it an exorcism. She called it a cleansing. I call it an exorcism. But I said, had you not cleansed that place, what would have happened to that baby? And she was like, it would have tortured that child.
Ooh. Now, it seems to me that they're always interested in children. Why do you see that? Or why do you sense that? Or why do you know that?
Well, because that's what evil does. It preys on weakness.
On
And that's
weakness.
what
And the
and it
children are
exploits
more
weakness.
weak. Yeah, indefensible.
hmm The children are weak. They're new souls. You know, I tell people all the time. Like I had a friend of mine, and I can't remember. If you've heard me tell you some of this, you have to stop me and remind me because there's these. I don't remember every conversation you and I've had, but if I'm not mistaken, I told you about my friend whose wife was pregnant, and he started getting attacked in his sleep, and this thing was choking her in the bed. I think I told you about that the last time we interviewed.
I
Um,
think I did. You did tell me, and I reminded you, or I think I recalled that after that or before that, it wasn't that long. I spoke to Tony Spera, who told me about Annabelle. And Annabelle, one of the stories was that this one of the people who held Annabelle prior to Ed and Lorraine Warren, that this person had the doll in the room and woke up or had a dream that this doll was choking him, this person. And he woke
mhm.
up and the doll was in its place, quiet and alone, and then there were three razor like slashes on him. That's why I remember the story you told me of this person being choked because of
Right.
that.
Well, during that conversation, I kind of brought something to light that I think everybody needs to know. So, anytime there's a new soul brought into this earth, and it's a newborn child, there are two forces that go into play. There's a hedge of protection that's put on that child by God, and then there's the forces of evil that start immediately hammering away of that hedge of protection. And I'll harken back to his story because his story continued on, and we're talking about children and how evil likes to target children. So his wife is now, I think she's like 7 months pregnant, and he calls me and he says, "Man, I need to know what to do." And he's like frantic. And this is like 6:30 in the evening. And I'm like, "Okay, bro, what's wrong?" He's like, "Man, my wife was getting out of the car and walking up to our apartment. And when she got to the top of the steps, there was this gigantic black shadow standing in front of our doorway." And I said, "Well, what did your wife do?" And he told me she stood there frozen. I said, "Well, did she call on Jesus' name? Did she tell it to leave?" And he was like, "She didn't know what to do." And it just kind of stood there and they had this standoff. And then it walked through the door into the apartment. And I said, "Well, bro," I said, "that's whatever it is trying to show itself to you and it's revealing itself to you." And I said, "It tells me that you guys aren't doing the prayers that you need to do." He's like, well, I do my prayers every day. And I said, no, I gave you certain prayers you need to do. I tried to explain to you that anytime there's a new soul, that evil comes forward. I said, the more powerful that new soul is, and the more stronger that kid's destiny is, there's more forces that come for it, right?
Hmm.
So a couple of days
Makes
after that,
sense. The
his
biggest,
wife,
the people that would battle the demons, the more they have the strongest destiny, would be the
yep,
strongest to have to hold off.
no, 2 days after that, his wife has a car accident, a bad accident. The baby's fine, she's fine. A couple of days after that, he loses his job,
Whew.
and things take a downturn for him, right? And so he's on the phone with me, and he's just like, man, I don't understand what's going on. I said, bro, I told you this happens every time. I said, I can go back over friend after friend after friend's life. Every time there's a new child born, something else goes off the rails. And whether it's the child is coming into the world, and then the dad loses his job, or the mom loses her job, or a family member dies, or um, the house goes into full. There's always these little small things that happen because it's evil targeting that kid, and we don't have the understanding of how chains of events kind of happen. So if you imagine me and you, Dr. J, we standing in a cornfield, right? We're
Hmm.
just and the stalks are higher than our heads. We can't see left and right. Only thing we can see is straight down that line of corn stalks, and we can only see so far because it's overgrown. Well, what you got to understand is when you're dealing with demonic entities, they are essentially on a ladder above the corn stalks, and they can see forward, backwards, left, and right. They can see this. They can see the whole timeline, and so they can see how an event that they do here, where the mom has an accident in the car, can affect that child 5, 6, 7 years from now. But we can't see that. You know what I'm saying? And so when people start encountering these things, and I'm gonna go into a couple other stories like this so to make you understand a little bit more. When we start encountering these kind of demonic things, um, and it seems like it's a little bit of a nudge, that nudge over time becomes extremely significant. You know what I'm saying? It becomes, it's like
Stronger,
just
more obvious.
uh, the best way to put it to you like is this. If we have a 90-degree angle, right?
Hmm.
And perfect L-shaped 90-degree angle. If that line and that angle is taking us straight out to our destiny, if we shift that by 3 degrees to where it's 93 degrees, as it expands, it keeps widening and widening and widening and widening. It takes us further and further off our point that we need to go to. Sometimes it only takes 1 or 2 degrees in a direction in order for you to miss the mark. And they know these things, so therefore they do these things. You understand what I'm saying to you?
Yes.
Um, and by no means am I a demonologist, but I've had to come to these conclusions because of the things that have transpired with me and happened with me, and how things have had to be corrected supernaturally for me to put me back at points to where it's like, whoa, all this stuff got fixed in a week. Why was it being fixed? Because you were so far off and you got hit so hard, you had to have a supernatural correction in order for it to get back on track. Um, and that's when you start talking about the demonic entities and what they do to influence children and influence families, and it actually influence nations. That's what you're dealing with, and it's that significant.
Can you talk about a nation that's been influenced like that?
Well, this nation has been influenced by it. You see it. I mean, you see it. You're in the politics. You see it all the time. We
It's
got
true.
like drag queen story hour where men are dressed up as women in
Uh,
front of children in the library right
what
now. If you don't
about
get
with
no demonic,
7 year old whose poor kid, this poor kid, his mother is being brainwashing, whatever the hell she's doing to this kid, and convincing this kid who's not even close to puberty that he's a girl. Like he wants to have a surgery to be a girl. That's fucking disgusting. I'm sorry.
oh,
That
dude,
kid, give him a chance to breathe and grow up first before someone else makes up his mind.
it's the spiritual warfare going on in this country is so prevalent and it's so out in the open that it would take somebody who's just completely has blinders on not to see it. I mean, it really, really does. When you start seeing stuff like that, where the mom is saying, "Oh, you're a girl," and the little kid is like, "Nah, I'm a boy."
That's
You know what I'm
right.
saying?
Yeah,
And when
yeah.
you see the images of that little boy and you see his eyes and you see the stress on that child's face, you realize that, man, that only something evil would do that. We know that it's real evil because real evil targets children.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? And that's how you know it's real, true evil. Um, Now there are spirits that actually target us as individuals, and those spirits that influence us to do things. But we have choices. We have a little bit more willpower. We're developed. We have an opportunity to develop those spiritual defenses. Kids don't have that opportunity, and so when you see those kids being targeted, then you know that's what it is. That's just like they declassified documents about the satanic groups that were molesting and raping children, black satanic masses in churches where they were doing it to children.
Yeah, yeah.
Priests were
This
doing it. So
the whole ritual evolved around the sacrificial child.
yeah, and but that's how you know it's real evil. That's how you know it's the true evil. Like um, I said this in this album that I'm releasing on Halloween night. It's called Adonai. It's supposed to be a 30-story album, but when I listened to all 30, it was only 10 that I thought that was really worthy of being released. So I'm only releasing a solid 10. But I said this in this album is that we have a problem when in the kind of in the paranormal world, in the paranormal realm. We don't understand how we're seduced by certain things, and we don't understand the purpose of darkness, and we don't understand the true purpose of evil. The purpose of evil is to validate. The purpose of evil is to validate the good. The purpose of the darkness is to validate the light, not to just submerge yourself in the darkness. And I said this, Dr. J, on an interview last week on a Monday with my boy Joe Roop, right? We were talking, and we kind of go deep into a whole bunch of stuff. And we were talking about hoodoo and voodoo, and I was telling him hoodoo and voodoo stories. And remind me, that's what I want to tell you next, because it brings in the kids again.
Okay.
And um, the day I finished that interview, well, let me repeat what I said then, which caused a problem. Then I was telling people that those who practice magic, there's two types of people that practice magic. First of all, I told them all magic comes from God. And I was like, if you don't understand that, then you're crazy. All magic comes from the main source, and there's little bitty other sources that tapped into the main source, but all magic comes from the main source, which is God. And I said, but the problem with using magic for some people is that it's a shortcut for them. They take a shortcut because they want a desired outcome. But because you're not the person that you need to be, when you get the outcome, you can't grasp it. You can't hold on to it. So there are people down here who do spells to women who do spells to get a man and keep a man. Well, you get the man temporarily. They have sex with the man. They have him around. And then that spell is broken because you weren't the woman that you needed to be to have that man. Vice versa. You're not the man you needed to be to have that woman. Or they do fast luck spells to win money. Well, yeah, you win $5,000. But within 7 days, that $5,000 is spent is because you're
Spin.
not
Yeah.
financially responsible enough to have the $5,000
Same
because
reason why
shortcut.
lottery winners usually are the first to go broke. And it sounds implausible, but it's true.
But that's what happens to people because they want to take the shortcuts. And so I'm having that conversation with Joe. We kind of go real deep into it. And 2 days later, no, yeah, I would say 36 hours later, 24 hours later, that same time of night, the next night, Dr. J, my stomach feels as if someone's punching me in my
Ooh.
gut. Like I had a second heartbeat. That's how, like, you know how when you run real fast, you can feel your heartbeat going boop, boop,
Yeah,
boop, 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 boop.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
that's
I had
right.
a second heartbeat in my stomach. And it was
Jesus.
like that from 2 o'clock in the morning until I would say 2 o'clock in the evening. 2 o'clock in the morning, I get up. I'm like, okay, I know I got a little bit of heartburn problems. Let me go get some Prilosec and let me take some Tums. So I take all this medicine, don't stop. It just doesn't stop. About 12 o'clock the next day, I'm I'm wanting to smoke a cigar, and I'm like, man, I really want to smoke this cigar, but I can't smoke it because my stomach going freaking crazy, and this is gonna make it worse. Blah 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 blah. And then a little voice in the back of my head says, you know, this has nothing to do with your stomach. This is someone doing this to you. You need to pray about it. So I go get my cigar. I light the cigar. And when I'm lighting the cigar, I say, well, God, I said, whoever's doing this, I said, could you just send me a sign by stopping it for a little while? Because I'm going to do what I shouldn't do. If I do this, this should make it worse. But if I do this and it stops, then I know that you're telling me somebody's doing it. Man, I lit that cigar, took a big puff, my stomach stopped hurting. I'm like, oh, Lord, somebody done did this. So I come back. I start preparing some psalms and reading them and blah, 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 blah. After I released those psalms prayers, my stomach stopped hurting. And it goes completely away. And that's kind of leading into the hoodoo voodoo stuff that I want to tell you. But I tell that story to say this. People can only do what, for me personally, people want to do what God allows them to do. But at the same time, there's only, when you try and hurt somebody using magic or using spells, like you're only going to bring something worse back to you. And what comes back to you typically comes 7 to 10 times worse than what you put out. So people really should be careful in that magic arena, in that magic realm. If you're using stuff to better your life, along with developing yourself spiritually as a person and holistically as a person, I think, that's how you achieve some of the higher levels of being a magician. But if you're just doing it just to do it and try and take advantage and hurt people, it's eventually going to hurt you. And it's going to hurt you way more than it hurts the other person. You know what I'm saying? Now,
I do.
did I tell you, and I'm trying to remember, did I tell you the story, and this goes into hoodoo and voodoo, did I tell you the story about the potato salad down here?
No.
All right, so let's go into New Orleans hoodoo and voodoo. This story, give you the background. So I'm talking to, let's not use his real name because he's got a lot of problems. So I'm talking to Brennan. That's not it, but that's not his
Just
name.
use
But
an
Brennan.
alias. Brennan's fine.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
using Brennan because this dude's a 100% thug. So I'm talking to Brennan, and I'm at his shop, and we're talking about the paranormal. And this guy is like, "Yo, I got some stories I want to tell you, but I don't know if you're gonna believe me." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna believe you." I said, "But I'm gonna ask for some proof." And he's like, all right. I'm gonna tell you the story about what happened to my uncle. He was a player back in the day, and one of them chicks put something on him. And I'm like, all right, well, where your uncle at now? He alive? And he's like, yeah, he alive. I said, call him. So he calls his uncle on the phone, and he's like, yo, uncle. And he's like, yeah, what's going on, man? He's like, man, I got my partner here. I want to tell him your potato salad story, but before I tell him, I want you to tell him that it's the truth. And so this dude gets quiet on the phone, like you can hear a pin drop. He was like, yeah, man, that girl put that stuff on me, man. I ain't gonna never forget her for what she did, right? And then and I'm like, all right, so I got enough confirmation to know that this story is true. So the story goes like this. Back before Katrina, his uncle was 100% player. He had a wife and children at home. He had a second family on the West Bank of New Orleans with a woman and children, and then he had a girlfriend. Now, for those of you who are from New Orleans, there's two sides of New Orleans. There's the East Bank and the West Bank. It's divided by a bridge that goes over the Mississippi River. Now, for whatever reason, people in New Orleans act like they're allergic to driving over this bridge. Like people born and raised in New Orleans, from one side to the other, at any point in time, you can drive and cross that bridge in 5 to 10 minutes. But people act like crossing that bridge is an hour-long drive. So there are people in New Orleans who grew up on one side of the river that pretty much don't visit the other side of the river unless it's like for a football game or something like that. But they don't, it's like these two sides of the city just don't mesh. So he's got one family on one side, one family on the other side. He's got a girlfriend. Well, the girlfriend didn't know about any of the families. She finds out that he has not only one family, but two families, gets pissed off. It's this man's birthday, and couple of days before the birthday, she confronts him about it. They kind of exchange words, go back and forth, have this big argument, and it dies off. Then she starts being nice to him again. He's having a birthday party at City Park, which is in the middle of the city. But she can't come to the birthday party. Why? Because he's got a wife and kids. So she gets to the party early, brings this potato salad, Dr. J. And for those of you who not from New Orleans, you know there's number one rule in New Orleans is don't eat food from people you don't know. The reason why
Yeah.
that there is because people in New Orleans do magic and they know how to do stuff. So um, she drops this potato salad off, tells everybody it's just for him, all his friends, because it's crazy. All his friends, male and female, know about her. They know about the other family, but they never tell his wife anything. So she drops it off, tells everybody it's for him, leaves, goes about her business. He comes to his birthday party. They got the music playing, Frankie Beverly and Maze, people dancing, doing a bus stop, start eating a potato salad. 6 o'clock rolls around that evening, and he starts feeling sick on his stomach. And by 6:30, he's on the ground, like balled up in pain, like holding his stomach, like in the fetal position. By 7 o'clock, they have him in a hospital, in Charity Hospital, and he going into the emergency room. They put him on a gurney, and they start opening his mouth because he's choking, and there's this green slime in his mouth. And the doctors start trying to take this slime out of his throat because it's choking him, and they are there pulling this long green, like you remember how they had that slime that used to come in a bucket for
Oh
kids in the
yeah,
early
yeah. I used
90s?
to get that shit in the early '80s from like the
In the early
quarter
80s,
vendors.
yeah.
Remember that? Those little slot machine kind of for kids where they have
Yeah, remember
gum
that?
and candy. Yeah.
That
I
it's like that, except for it's thicker and it's kind of got this it's kind of got these lumps and little bumps all over it. But it's and they pulling this stuff out of this man's throat. They pull it out for like 4.5 minutes. They fill up a bucket of this stuff on the floor. One of the nurses passes out while this is going on. The doctor is freaking out because he ain't never seen nothing like this in his life. They get it all out of his stomach. Then he starts throwing up this black stuff. And after that, homeboy is fine. Like literally, he's fine. Now, pause right there. When Brennan's telling me the story, when we get to this point of the story, I say, I don't believe this. You got to call your uncle back. Call his uncle back. I'm like, yo, uncle, this is James. I said, man, he telling me the story, dude. And I said, I'm not believing this. He was like, man, sure enough, as my mama's in the grave over in the cemetery, he starts naming the slot and plot that his mom is in the grave. He's like, that's what happened to me. And he was like, they pulled, now my boy told me they took one bucket. He was like, they pulled 2 buckets of that green crap out of my body, man. Then I started vomiting this black, smutty, slimy stuff. And I felt better. And I was like, well, what happened to the chick that did it? And he was like, I saw her one time after that, but I haven't seen her since. So we get off the phone. So now I'm asking my partner Brendan, I'm like, man, what happened to the bro that did this? Because you don't do that kind of stuff to people and just walk off. And he was like, well, what everybody knows is he saw her one time after that, and then nobody saw her else again. Nobody ever saw her again. I was like, oh, okay, I get it.
Wow.
And he was like, yeah, you're not listening. I was like, okay. So
She's really not coming back, I guess.
yeah,
Huh?
she ain't coming back. She over there with the alligator somewhere. And that's the crazy stuff that happens, man, when people dabble in magic and do stuff. And in a city like New Orleans, that stuff is everywhere. And I think I've said this to you before. You can go to pretty much 7, 8, 9, 10 botanical gardens here and get, candles and all kind of crap just to mess with people. I mean, you can get stuff pretty much any way you want to mess with.
Right? For breaking up people's loved ones or breaking up affairs or relationships, right? All sorts of that stuff exists.
Anything. Yeah, I mean, it's there. You can
Anything
break
that
up
involves
relationships.
taking over the force of someone else, right? Being in control of somebody else or causing them harm, right?
That and also bringing blessings to yourself. I mean, there's not only hurting other people, but you can do stuff for yourself as well, and you can bring blessings to other people. So I mean, it's a lot that's involved in it. Um, that 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 can help people or hurt people. So for example, when after I prayed about my stomach, um, there were people that were calling me that within that time period that I was supposed to do stuff for, but I couldn't really do anything because my stomach was acting up. And some of them were spiritual workers. So finally, when I started answering my phone, two of the ladies was like, "Yo, why are you not answering your phone? You never not answer your phone." I was like, "Well, this is what's going on." Blah 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 blah. And both of them were like, "Oh really?" Like, "Oh really? Somebody did that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure somebody did it." And it was like, "Oh okay. Well, I'll call you back in a couple of days, and we're gonna find out who did what." Um, and it just goes to show you, that's why I personally never do anything to anybody. I guess it's a part of growing up in New Orleans. You grow up with the mentality that you mind your own business. You don't do anything to hurt anybody because you know that once you start something with someone, there's really no way of knowing how that person's going to handle what you do. So you don't have, it's kind of like slapping a man in the face and then he shoots you. You're like, man, I slapped you. You didn't get a chance. You shouldn't have shot me. Well, no, you shouldn't have slapped the man. And that's kind of how we grow up down here is leave people the hell alone
Yeah.
and they leave you the hell alone. Because once it gets started, then it
Respect.
just
Once
never
it gets
stops.
started, it doesn't stop until someone's dead or in jail, usually.
Yeah, it just doesn't stop. So, and it's on a spiritual gangster level, it's way worse. It gets way worse on the spiritual level because once it gets started, then real bad things start happening to people. Um, and it kind of goes off the rails. I think the next story I want to share with people, um, did I tell you guys? And it's coming to mind because one of the ladies I was told this story while I was with this lady, Bloody Mary, Mary Mylan down here. Did I ever tell you the story about the oil man down here?
The oil man. No. If
Hmm.
you did, you need to refresh our ears.
If anybody's in the chat and they listen to the last
No,
interview,
I'm seeing
I'm
here in
reading
the
the chat.
chat. No one here is commenting on having said that. That's for sure.
Okay. Um, so we were giving kind of a paranormal symposium and talk over at the Voodoo House on Rampart Street.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you ever been there, but they got this gigantic courtyard in the back. And
One city I have yet to visit that it's definitely on my list.
well, we're at that courtyard. Um, and it's about 8 to 10 people out there. And so Mary wanted me to come over and tell some stories. So it's kind of she and I sitting there talking, going back and forth, a little banter. Cool chick, she and I get along extremely well. And so we open the floor for questions. And so this first guy, it's a brother, and he's from Mississippi,
Hmm.
and he says, "Well, say, bro, you're black. Black people don't talk about the paranormal, man. What made you talk about the paranormal?" I said, "Because we have some of the greatest paranormal stories in our culture that we don't share."
Yeah,
I was
that's
like, "The
true.
problem with us is we too worried about what people think about it, so we don't tell people what's going on." I said, "So I share the stories of all people." He's like, "Oh man, that's cool. That's cool. I got a story, but I don't want to tell you." I'm like, "See, you prove the point I'm talking about. You worry about what
There you
people think."
go. There, right?
To my left is this couple. Um, they look kind of like, I don't know. They look like they've been through hell and they were on the other side of it, like they've been through something, and they were looking for answers. And what I mean by that is, um, there's certain people you can look into their eyes and see that they've been kind of messed with and played with and toyed with. It's kind of like, um, it's kind of like if you can imagine the look on a mouse's face after it's been toyed with by a lion for a year. You know what I'm saying? And it's no longer in the cage with the lion, but it still has that fear. It was a younger white couple. Their skin was extremely pale. And what I mean by pale, like just like like you guys had never been outside pale. You know what I'm saying? Um, as a married couple, there was no kind of connection. You know how when you marry couples together, like the body language is at least the man maybe turned towards his woman or the woman maybe turned towards a man. There's certain things you look for. like
And
body language.
micro expressions too that they have
Not
between the two of
right,
them. Yeah.
right. And there was nothing there. It was just like these two vessels sitting there. It's the best way to explain it. And so the young lady says, "Well, my husband and I started encountering something, and we want to know if you've ever heard of it." And I'm like, "Okay, I've heard thousands of stories that are real, true stories that happen to people." I said, you probably won't stump me, but let's give it a shot." So they start talking about how they got married, moved into this house, and for the minute they moved in, their personalities changed. They started arguing about stupid stuff like who's supposed to take out the trash. She was getting mad at him for leaving the toilet seat up. You know, crazy stuff like who's going to wash the dishes. And then from there, she started experiencing paranormal activity, like coming home with grocery bags, putting the groceries on the counter, putting them in the cabinets, going to use the bathroom, coming back, everything was back in the bag. And she was telling him that she was experiencing this, but he wasn't experiencing anything at first. So it didn't start happening to him until he would go take a bag, take out the trash. Like they would take a paper bag, put trash in it, go put it outside in the trash can, come inside, go into the bedroom, close the door, come back out. That same bag that didn't have any trash in it was in the kitchen on a counter. But they had just put the exact same bag, they had marked it and everything, garbage can, but it was back on the kitchen counter. So then it started to get worse and worse, where they had these different experiences that were full-fledged poltergeist paranormal experiences. Um, I asked them if they were praying about it, and they said they were atheists. I said, okay, you guys are perfect candidates for getting harassed. So she goes on to talk about the night that they both saw the oil man. And she's like, it's this thing that looks like a human, but it's got this oily skin, and it's runny, oily skin that moves and rotates, kind of like if you had motor oil dripping and running down your body, but it would go down and then come back up and down and up, like its breathing was the motion of this oily kind of substance that was on the skin. And I said, well, do you mean like Crisco oil? Do you mean like motor oil? She's like, well, have you ever seen like old motor oil, like when it comes out of the car, how it's black?
Black, yeah.
Yeah. And she's like, but it was thicker. And she said in the light, it kind of gave that rainbowy tint that motor oil gives off when it's mixed with water. And I was like, wow, that's an accurate description, because I remember being a kid and, watching the older guys in my neighborhood change the oil on their cars, and they would start spraying the oil to wash it down the drain. And when the sun shines on it, it kind of gets this rainbowy tint once it mixes with the water. And I was like, wow, okay, I can clearly see what she's talking about. Well, she's in bed, sleep. She has her back. She's on the right-hand side of the bed, laying on her left-hand side. Her back is to the side of the bed where it's kind of exposed. She's actually snuggled up, kind of spooning her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And she starts to get this feeling that something's behind her. Well, when she initially gets that feeling that something's behind her and it starts to kind of overwhelm her, like she needs to turn around, she doesn't want to look. But she's to be sure, because I feel like something's there, and I really want to go to sleep. When she rolls over and looks, she sees the waist of this oily figure.
Ooh,
But
jeez.
the problem for her was initially it was so close that all she was seeing was blackness, right? So imagine that you roll over and you're supposed to see your dresser, but all you see is this blackness. She hadn't looked up, she hadn't looked around, and so she's there laying looking at this blackness, trying to figure out what the hell it is. And then she starts to run her eyes up and look up, and she sees that it's a figure of a man. And it ain't no small figure of a man. It's a big figure of a man. And it has a head, and it has arms, and it has shoulders, and it has everything that a man would have, except for it's this oily kind of substance, gooey substance for flesh. Well, once she realizes what it is, she jumps, like literally jumps up in the bed, kind of scooting over, lands on her husband's hip, because remember, he's laying on his side, When she lands on his hip, she forces him to fall down towards her. She bounces back towards the thing, which freaks her out even more. And so now this woman is literally in the bed, digging her feet in the bed, pushing backwards. Well, her husband wakes up pissed off, and like both of these people are telling me the story. He wakes up pissed off, turns around, looks, and this thing is next to the bed, and then it starts to open its mouth, and it creates this abnormal. The way he described it was, he was like, "Man, imagine opening your mouth as wide as you could, but then opening it 2 times wider than that." And the oil was kind of connected between this gap, and it was still moving up and down in the connections. So like imagine like you open your mouth, you take your fingers and you cover that gap, right? But you don't have any teeth, but you got these thin fingers covering that gap. But the oil is moving up and down in between those little threads that are covering the gap. And so I'm telling him, I said, bro, what do you do in a situation like that? He was like, man, there was nothing I could do. He was like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I just didn't know. And I said, well, how long did it stay there? He said, as she was screaming, it turned and walked out of the room. And I was like, what do you mean walk? He's like, it turned its shoulders and walked out of the room and walked down the hallway. And I was like, man, that would have scared the hell out of me. They stay in the bed for like another 4 or 5 minutes. And finally, he gets the nerve to get up and go try and see where this thing is going. He walks out into the hallway, and he sees this thing standing there by the kitchen like it was waiting on him. And then it walks back into the kitchen. When he goes in the kitchen, it's not there anymore. That night, he combs the house trying to find some evidence of what they saw. Because in his mind, there was no way that this thing could be walking on carpet and have this oily kind of skin and not leave anything. Like it should have a trace of it somewhere. Mm-hmm. He found what he described as a pinky fingernail sized drop of oil on his carpet. And he smeared it onto a napkin. And he said that he was thinking about getting it tested and doing something with it. They put it on a dresser, and then they moved from the dresser to the drawer, one of the dresser drawers. And then when they decided that they wanted to try and get somebody to look at it, and they opened the drawer, it wasn't there anymore. And she didn't throw it away. He didn't throw it away. They move out of that house. Well, after that, the wife starts to get extremely sick.
That's what was my next question. Is it have to do with her and him, or is it the house?
No. It's the house.
Okay.
But after that, the wife starts to get extremely sick, and then he starts having problems on his job. He was employed by one of his closest friends, and so he's working for one of his best friends, but him and his friend start having problems. Ooh. He finally discloses to his friend, who's his boss, what's going on, and the guy tells him, look, man, I think you guys need to move out of that house. So they pretty much abandon the house. It's not really a move out. It's like they abandoned it. Like, we leaving all our crap here. We just getting all new crap. They abandoned the house and moved into an apartment. She told me the minute she moved into that apartment, she felt better. And she said within a week of being in that apartment, all her physical ailments like headaches, stomach pains, back pains, leg pains, all went away. So it was the house. So Mary and I are there talking to him, and I said, well, what happened to the house? Because logically, that's the next question. The house went into foreclosure. Someone else bought it. It was a family with a young kid. They were there for like 2 months, and then they moved out, and then it went back into foreclosure. And then another family moved in, and it went back into foreclosure 4 months after that, and now it's just sitting there boarded up and vacant.
Still to this day.
To this day.
Wow. I'm surprised no paranormal star like the people who bought that house that was super possessed, I think in Indiana, was bought by, I don't know, maybe Zach Baggins or some paranormal group or rock star, but it was somebody who had the money they could afford to buy a house that was just full of evil.
Oh, they contact me. I'll try and cut a deal for them. I'll go try and buy it and flip it to them. Shit. I know one thing. I don't want nothing to do with that house.
I don't blame you, my friend. Let me give a shout out real quick to Justin T and the Blue Crew for the super chat. Justin T, you are the man, and I want to thank you. And also want to thank you, Dark Waters. We still got an hour to go, but this is a shout out because not only did the super chat just come through, I'm talking to the people in Louisiana, since Justin T is in Louisiana and you are in New Orleans, Louisiana.
No, all good. Where's Joe? What part of Louisiana is Justin from?
Justin, I'll let's wait for that 60-second or so delay. Justin, where are you in Louisiana? Let's find out. Well, in the meanwhile,
Yeah,
so
I'm
we
reading
wait.
it.
Hold on here. Zach had this house. The Zach had that house destroyed. We're all wearing paranormal. Okay, no, still waiting for Justin. Justin, where in Louisiana are you? Around Lake Charles.
Oh, Justin, let me ask you this. Let me tell you a story, Justin. You tell me if you ever heard anything like this around. So this happened 20 miles outside of Lake Charles, going towards Beaumont. If I'm not mistaken, the next thing is Beaumont, then Lake Charles, then Lafayette. Guy calls and tells me the story. Fantastical story. I know this man not lying because he's just not the type to lie, and I've been talking to him a lot. Picture this. Homeboy leaves Houston, headed to Panama City, Florida, right? And he's a regional sales manager for this pharmaceutical company. He's leaving Houston, headed to Panama City, Florida, gets 20 miles outside of Lake Charles and has to take a leak. So he stops at a gas station. Dude has a Ford Expedition um, rental car, pulls up to the pump, gets out of the car, goes into the gas station, speaks to the girl behind the counter named Nancy, right? Asks this young lady, hey, can I use your restroom? She says, sure. The restroom is in the back. Go ahead and use the restroom. The man goes into the restroom, comes out. As he's coming out of that restroom, walking towards the counter, he notices that it looks like it's about to rain outside. Looking at the girl behind the counter, he says, hey, when I walked in the store, it was sunny. Like, why does it look like it's about to storm outside? The young lady tells him, sir, I didn't even know you were in the store. You must have came in here while I was in the back room getting some more of the inventory, but we're about to close because there's a hurricane on the way.
Whoa, she didn't even remember him coming
No, no, no,
in?
no, no. You got to listen to this crazy, listen to this, I could curse, listen to this crazy shit. So he tells me, he says, James, I know he said, James, I know you're going to think I'm out my mind, but dude, the girl's name badge when I first walked in the store read Nancy. When I was talking to her after coming out of the bathroom, it read Leslie.
Whoa.
And he's like the exact same girl. He's like Creole girl. And you know, because he's talking, he's like, man, you know, Creole women are really, really pretty. You know, they
Yes,
gorgeous.
they are.
And he's like, Creole girl, she was gorgeous. And he's like, her name badge said Leslie, but when I first walked in, it said Nancy. And he told me, he said, man, in that moment, I'm standing there looking at this woman, and she's panicking because she's like, she needs to go home to see her children.
Yeah,
She needs to
there's a
get out of here,
hurricane
get to
coming.
her
Yeah, that's
children, because
right.
there's a
She's got to
hurricane
take
coming.
care of her own before she
But
takes care
he's
of the
trying to
store.
figure
Yeah.
out how in the hell her name is now Leslie, and how in the hell is it about to rain outside because it was sunny and hot outside when he first walked in, right? They're standing, the rain starts coming down, wind starts whipping around, an emergency broadcast comes over the little TV she's got. You know, it goes boo,
Yeah.
and the thing
Oh, yeah.
tells them that they spotted a tornado crossing I-10, Interstate 10, which is right there by Lake Charles where Homeboy is, crossing over the highway. Next thing you know, the freaking awning where his car is starts ripping off and tearing away because the winds are blowing so strong. Him and this young lady are still standing there arguing. The door to the store is literally blowing open, like the wind. You know how it goes ding, 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 where the bell rings? He was like, dude, we're standing there arguing back and forth, and you hear the bell, the little bell from when the door opens going ding, 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 because it'll open and close. Ding, 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 ding. And then next thing you know, the roof right there where they are standing and talking starts to shake. And she's like, come on, we got to hurry up and go into the bathroom. We got to run to the back. So he's trying to run to the back and follow this girl because she's done jumped over the counter, running towards the back bathrooms. And she's saying these bathrooms are made of cinder blocks. The walls are made of cinder blocks. We need to go into the bathroom. And he verifies it. He says, listen, when I was in the bathroom at the first time, it was made of cinder blocks. He's like, so I'm listening to this girl. She takes off running. As he's running, windows start breaking, glass starts shattering around him, and he slips, falls on his face, gets up, runs into the bathroom. When he gets into the bathroom, and there was only one bathroom now, this is the crazy thing. He gets into that bathroom. She should be in the bathroom. He looks around. She's not there. Finally, he had been in the bathroom for like 3-4 minutes. He's hearing noises outside, like there's a tornado noises, which you can't mistake tornado noises. It sounds like freight trains colliding outside. And he's freaking out because this girl should be in the bathroom with him. He shouldn't be alone. The man is scared out of his mind, but then he starts to hear a knock on the door. There's a knock on the door. He's thinking, okay, well, she went somewhere else. Maybe there's another bathroom. He opens the door. It's the girl, Nancy, the one that he originally saw.
The first
name
one.
Badge says
Wow.
Nancy. The original. Name badge says Nancy, the whole 9. She says, sir, you've been in this bathroom a long time. Other people need to use the bathroom. He's calling her Leslie. He's saying, Leslie, you okay? It's good. What's going on? Comes out, broad daylight outside, sunny. There's a man in there getting a hot dog and soda. There's a woman with her 2 kids harassing her about Snickers and Reese's Pieces. And this dude is like, what the fuck is going on? Like, he's literally screaming.
It sounds like
he
literally slipped into another dimension, alternate dimension, where Nicole was Leslie, and the building was a version of another type of another timeline or something like that.
Oh, no, you got to hear the rest of the story. So
wait, here, Justin's actually commenting on this. Let me read this here. It says, yep, I've heard that story before. It's true. It's happened to several folks, he writes.
I'm sorry about that. I muted for a second. I tell you what, he leaves because he's distraught at this point in time.
He leaves,
goes to get in a car.
I'd be confused.
And yeah, he's confused. He leaves, gets into the car or into his vehicle. He's sitting there trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And then he starts to feel these pains, like this pain in his skin on his left-hand side. It's in his fingers and his hands and his arms and in his face. Looks in the mirror. He's got glass all in his skin, like literally cut marks all in his skin from where glass shattered and hit him when the glass shattered inside of that building. Homeboy told me, he said, bro, I drove off and he said, I've never driven a car where I felt like I was having an outer body experience. He's like, I know I was driving. He's like, but I wasn't all the way there. He's like, I wasn't speeding. I had it on cruise control. I stayed in the right lane the whole time. You know, I remember maneuvering back and forth around a few cars, but he didn't come back to himself until he got to his hotel room and had a chance to sit down and really contemplate and think about what happened. He called and told his wife. She didn't believe him. He called and told his best friend. His best friend didn't believe him. And it screwed with him to this day. And so when he and I started talking about it, I was like, dude, I think you some kind of way went to a time slip, or maybe you got into a time portal, but something very bad happened to you. Then I say, listen, prove to me that you had some kind of scars or damage from, this happening.
The tornado, the wreckage.
Yeah, he sends me a picture of the backside of his forearm where there's these gashes. Like, you can clearly tell it's like multiple like gashes where you can see where he was cut, but you can see where it clearly had healed, but you can still see the gashes. They're pretty big gashes on his arm. And I was like, dude, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. That's one of the more fantastical, insane stories that I've been told lately, but that's just the beginning of the rabbit hole. I mean, we haven't even gone down the deep part of the rabbit hole.
Well, let's start going deeper. What can you tell us? What's the crazier shit? Like I said, scare the shit out of me. You already have, by the way, just so you know. We're barely halfway through this, and you've already scared the shit out of me. So take me further.
Well, I think the craziest stuff I'm working on, and those who follow me are familiar with these stories, from these two guys named Roger and Steve, and their first story they told me was about hunting Bigfoots in Alaska, and then they started sharing multiple stories with me. Well, the last set of stories, um, that they shared with me, after they told me those stories and I put them out, there was this disconnect where I was having a significantly hard time getting in contact with anybody. Um, and to this day, I still have trouble getting in contact with certain people. Like, phone numbers have been changed, backup phone numbers have been changed, and so I'm still having a hard time getting in contact with certain people. But then other people will call me back, and I was getting ready to release a story, called Operation Black Sun, which is actually one of the things that they did, uh, across America and in Europe. And I get a phone call from one of them, and he says, "Hey, I need you to hold off on putting that out." And I said, "Well, why?" I said, "It's been sanitized, it's cleaned, it's pretty much 100% entertainment." He's like, "Well, there's something that we discovered that we didn't know about." This man goes on to talk to me about these groups that we know of them as the elite. Um, People call them like the elites and the Rothschilds and all. They call them the Illuminati. I think it's what the best way to describe it. Well, he starts going into some shit that made me rethink even putting out anything. He says, "Well, Jay, I don't know if this is the thing for us to do right now because we didn't know what we were dealing with when we first started. We didn't realize that there was a war. We realized there was a war going on, but we didn't realize that it was an interdimensional war and that it was an interplanetary war." And I'm like,
And
"What?"
hasn't it happening literally since the dawn of mankind? Good versus evil, the Sodomites versus Gomorrah, or Sodom and Gomorrah, is destroyed by God. You would think that there were other planets just like us that have their own people, their own forms, and people who have gone a lot further than we can and start to terraform and go on to other worlds, hence coming upon ours and maybe wanting to take control of ours. So you might have like another, like you mentioned, interplanetary war. This is things that's it's always, as long as we've been around, this has always been happening. Wars, right?
Yeah, but Doc, this is stuff that now this may be stuff that other people have heard before, but for me, this was stuff I didn't. My man goes into the fact that we as the United States have been traveling through space since the 1940s. And this is all stuff that he's finding out because they've been recruited to work with another group of people. And since the 1940s, we've been to other galaxies. We know about all the different alien races. And then he goes into the interdimensional beings and the fact that there's a good group of human beings that are fighting interdimensional forces that are literally trying to ravage and ransack our planet. And so he starts tying in these kind of the things that they shared with me. It was kind of like these missing pieces to a puzzle that he didn't have that I was pointing out to him. Well, why would, for example, they were talking about this base in China that they visited. And you can listen to the story. I don't want to go all into it, but basically, the reason why I knew that there were human animal clones, um, and that there were human animal hybrids is because these guys went to a base in China and they actually talked to me about it.
Well, I know
And
they got money, right? They just celebrated 70 years of communism with this parade showing very Soviet style, like parade of rocketry and tanks and, very proud. But they not only are communists, they got a lot of money at the top, and Google and Apple, unfortunately, have literally, bowed down to them. Instead of, let's saying, hey, you're going to hack into us, instead of doing that, we'll just corroborate with you and we'll let you have our stuff as long as we can be in partnership with your state-owned agencies. Therefore, they have so many abilities to do things, I would think now. China. 30 years ago, you looked at something that was made in Japan. Not anymore. Most things are made in China, and there's a reason for that.
Well, the reason why China is where it is from a geopolitical, standpoint is because people like the Clintons actually gave them technology, war
Yes.
technology, and various groups of extremely powerful people decided that they wanted China to be their rest haven. Because in China, there's no rules, no regulations. There's slavery. There's um, organ harvesting. You can pretty much do whatever the hell you want to do in China, um, which is why those guys actually had to go to China to deal with one of those situations. But the insane thing is that when he started tying the pieces of the puzzle together, especially talking about interdimensional beings, he said, he's like, James, I'm starting to realize now that every last one of our conversations, there's been someone there listening to them. But they haven't, and we went through a lot of trouble, Dr. Jeff, making sure that by phone, you can't hear the conversation because they sent me a certain phone to talk to them. Like, but he's like, there's still interdimensional beings there listening to those conversations. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And he was like, there are dimensions that are right next to you that higher beings of higher frequencies and beings of lower frequencies are there. You just can't see them. You just can't hear them. And so he goes into how, with a lot of the stories and encounters that people have, that these are those beings coming from another dimension, allowing us to see them. And I was like, dude, I don't get it because it was so far over my head that I just didn't get it. And he was like, well, he was like, you're a very spiritual man. He was like, so when you pray, James, do you feel better? I was like, yes. He was like, well, what's the worst thing you've done? And he was like, well, what's the one thing that you do that makes you feel bad? And so I tell him, and he was like, well, when you're praying, you're resonating at a higher frequency and a higher level, which you're getting closer to God. He was like, when you do that other thing, you start resonating on a lower level and you're getting closer to demonic forces and other forces. And I was like, so what are these beings? And he was like, he was like, dude, they range they range the spectrum from insects to lizards to spirit animals to all this other stuff. And so we're sitting there talking, and I'm like, man, this is too much for me, dude. This is just too much. I can't comprehend what you're talking about because he's sitting there telling me that certain people are infested with interdimensional parasites to where you don't see it, but it's like Dr. J, it's like you and I can't see you and you can't. Well, if you were sitting in front of me and I was able to see what was going on in that dimension, you would have a gigantic snake wrapped around you.
Ooh, ouch. I get what you're saying. You kind of
And
need to
so,
be in sort of like you need like a sense of goggles if you could see through them, or
right.
some sort of a
And
vision in order to get through that veil.
right. And so then he goes on to tell me that they visited and talked with people who have the ability to see beyond the veil into those other dimensions. And I'm like, all right, bro. And I know these guys not lying because I vetted them. I've had friends of mine vet them that are in the FBI. I've had friends of mine. I mean, I've had these guys vetted. Like they the real deal. It's not like these some people who just calling me, trolling me. I'm just like, but this is just crazy. This is insane. And so when we start talking about interdimensional beings and a group of interdimensional beings that actually want to wreak havoc on nations and on people, it sounds like something demonic, right? Well, he goes into one of the more recent discussions that he had with a guy he called him the professor. And the professor was trying to explain to him why there's so much violence in certain communities. And he started talking about the black community and how in the black community there's so much violence because there's a violent parasite interdimensionally that's on certain people in that community. And it spread, and he started talking about how it was spread by through their people's bloodlines. And that violent parasite, there's certain areas and certain neighborhoods where it's so infested, if you could see it and you could see through the veil, it would look like just millions of bugs just crawling around. and they feed on violence and they feed on blood and they feed on death. And that's why those neighborhoods are that way. And in some houses where there's violent people, that's the same thing as there. But then there's other areas where you just cross a demarcation line where it's not there at all. And I was just like, man, it's insane. So I've been trying to put it together to tell it as a story, but I just think it's too fantastical for people to believe. I think it's just too much. If it's too much for me, and I've heard everything, I just think it's too much for everybody else. People in the chat can tell me if they think it's too much, or maybe I should do it. But it's like how do you explain that to people? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm looking right now in the chat. I don't see anybody that's complaining here. As a matter of fact, we definitely need some more details of that, because the things that people don't believe or don't want to believe or think that you're not going to believe in general usually tend to be true. That's a perfect way to hide out something. Real quick, let me acknowledge some people here. First of all, I got to thank Roll Pfeiffer Muller for his super chat. And also Manuel Silva, thank you also for you asking for a shout out. And on top of that, there was a question for you, but it wasn't about that. That's why I want you to continue on that topic. But might as well ask this question real quick because it's pretty specific. All right, here it goes. If you, James Darkwater, have a correlation acquainted with the works of Fred Saluga and Lon Strickler, ask him his late opinion of the Cynocephaly, maybe is that what you say? It's Cynocephalli.
Okay, so they want me to ask Lon Strickler about it?
He's asking if you have a correlation or acquainted with the works of Lon
No.
Strickler and Fred Saluga.
I know Lon. I know Lon's work, but I don't know who the other guy is.
Okay, well we covered that, and let me see down here if there's anything else that has recently come about where people say they don't want to hear it. No, nobody here does not want to hear what you have to say. So let's keep going. We can handle it. That's what I'm reading here.
Okay, and so the thing that when you start talking about the interdimensional beings, there are various forms of infestations, and so he really went deep into it, and he started talking about not only the violent infestations. He talked about gay infestations. He talked about homosexual infestations. He talked about this one particular infestation, which was greed, and he said that it was something that, if you can imagine, a bug that rubs off on one person to the other, and that depending on how high your vibrational frequency was, then it may rub off on you, but it'll die. But if you really vibrating on a low frequency, it just grows and it grows and it grows and it grows, and it's more of a mold than a bug, but it crawls onto your skin and then it starts to mold, and it's like you have this gigantic mold growing all over you. And for me, it's not far-fetched to believe that something like that exists. Mm-hmm. My problem is, how do you share that with people to where they understand that it exists when there's no empirical evidence of it? And how do you not sound completely insane sharing that with people? So I've been trying to figure out how to share it. Now, he's told me the stories of putting on the device and actually walking around and seeing it, but I just don't know how. I don't know how I'm going to do that. But what I'll tell you guys is this: there's a lot more going on around us than we are aware of. There's a hell of a lot more going on than we can sense and we can feel. And it explains why, for example, for me, there have been times where I could feel like someone was literally right there with me, but I couldn't see them. Literally, I would feel like someone's there. Like I did an interview a couple of weeks ago from this very same office, and I left. I had to leave out of here, which there's never been a creepy feeling in my office and other than that night. But that particular night, I cut the interview short and I left because it felt like someone was standing there over my shoulder, listening to everything I had to say. Like I was being spied on, but it was so close that it was literally
Literally
inside.
somebody next to you.
Right. And so,
It's more than just having the feeling of the eyes of someone. What did you actually feel breathing? Because there have been cases where people literally have not only felt that being of somebody right by them, but have felt breathing on them, whether it be on their shoulder, on their neck, but near them, but there was no one there, and that blew me the fuck away.
oh no, dude, I mean, I didn't feel anybody breathing, but I felt like somebody was here with me. But let me jump out of that puddle, that mud puddle, and go to something else because I don't even like that's me going into talking about stuff that I haven't even figured out how you talk about it yet. And for example, for people who are members of my website over at iamdarkwaters.com, there's a time period where there's kind of like these lulls in content because there's stuff that I'm told that I don't even know how the hell you retell it. You know, like that storm story about the guy who had the storm, who was in that storm. It took me a while to even figure out how in the hell am I going to tell this dude's story, and how do I make this all make sense? And then I got to the point to where I said, you know what, it doesn't make sense. Do you believe the guy? Yes or no? I said I believe him. So let's just do the story. Um, but I'll give you guys one of the more hood New Orleans stories. This definitely has to do with hoodoo. And if you guys know anything about hoodoo, hoodoo is the magical side of the voodoo and voodoo. So, and males who practice hoodoo are called root doctors. So this happened when I was in high school, um, and who, um, a friend of mine who moved to Houston actually shared this story with me once he realized what I was doing. He and I had a little bit of a falling out, and we ended up sitting down, smoking cigars, and talking. And we were kind of getting up to speed on life and all the rest of that foolishness. And then he was like, "Well, so what are you doing to make money? And what are you doing with this?" And I was telling him about all the different things I was into. And finally, he told me the story. So in New Orleans, we've never really been known for having gangs. Um, we've had wards. So you got 7th Ward, 9th Ward, Lower 9th Ward, 13th, 17th, 3rd Ward. Um, you got wards, the 8th Ward. And these are all different sections of the city. But when the motorbike craze kind of took off in New Orleans, because we're in the South, everything gets here late. So back in the 90s, people in New York in the 80s were riding around on motorbikes, popping wheelies, riding down the street. Well, that kind of stuff gets to the South extremely late. But when it gets to the South, we kind of do it harder and more crazy than they'll ever do it. So we started getting these kind of motorbike clubs. They weren't gangs, but they were clubs.
Like motors,
They,
like the what we see on TV with the Mayans MC or the Sam Crow Sons of Anarchy Motorcycle Club, whatever Redwoods edition was the motorcycle club the TV show depicted, which by the way had two Hell's Angels on the show as technical advisors who were in fact in Hell's Angels, including Sonny Barger, who was the founder of the Hell's Angels, if I'm not mistaken. Is that
I'm
what you're
not
talking about?
mistaken. Yeah, but not so much like they did it. It's more like groups of guys from the same neighborhood that had motorbikes. So
Okay, okay.
there would be groups of guys from the 7th Ward who all had motorbikes, and then they had guys from the 9th Ward who had motorbikes. And then, like in the 7th Ward, they call people from the 7th Ward the 7th Ward hardheads.
So not we're
And
talking
so
about not the people who are the one percenters, the outlaw patch that they get for killing someone, like the Men's of Mayhem or something like that, right? You're talking about not the other 99%, right? The normal people with bikes and clubs.
no, these dudes not normal about none of these dudes. No. So none of these guys. So there was this bar room in New Orleans East, all the way down Haynes Boulevard. You ride all the way out to the east of Haynes. There was this curve that took you back around to go to Michoud Boulevard. There was this bar room back there, white bar room. And so the motorbike boys was what they called each other. All of them were called motorbike boys. Anybody riding a bike down is called a motorbike boy. They would meet up over there and kind of hang out and have drinks and show off their bikes. Well, one evening they were all out there hanging out. My partner Glenn, back in those days, had a motorbike, and have an argument. I get shot, and they shoot him like 7, 8, 9 times. Right?
Ooh,
Get on the
ouch.
motorbikes, and they all take off, and they go on about their business. Well, after shooting that dude, they're zipping along their motorbikes and explain to you what Haynes Boulevard is. Imagine a street, a single street, 2 lane, 4 lane highway, two going one way, two going the other way, every bit of 11 miles long. On that 11-mile stretch, one, two, three, 4 red lights on that 11-mile stretch. That's it. Only 4 red lights. So if you can imagine, these dudes are like flooring it, like voo, flying, get away from this scene because one of their friends just murdered somebody. So they hit those motorbikes. They're going as fast as they can. They end up getting to Diamond Road. They pop up on the interstate going over the high rise into their neighborhood because New Orleans East is the ninth ward. So they're going over to the 7th ward, the 3rd ward, 13th, going back to their neighborhoods. Well, my particular friend Glenn is telling me, he said, man, I'm on a motorbike and I'm going over the high rise. And when I come down, I see another motorbike coming up on me. And he was like, Jay, this bike is coming, bruh, but it's going so fast, it don't make no sense to me because I'm having to bob and dip and weave through the traffic and shooting past trucks and cars. It's like this thing is coming straight at me. He's like, there's no way that it could come straight at me if I'm bobbing back and forth and it's just riding straight. So he's literally doing about 100 miles an hour going through this turn. If you look it up on the map in New Orleans, you'll see coming from New Orleans East to go to Metairie, there's this turn where you loop to the left, and it's a sharp, sharp turn. I'm talking about many people died in that turn. And he's doing 100 miles an hour going through that turn around a car. And when he comes out of the turn and kind of straightens his bike up and looks, that bike is going through the turn.
Whoa.
And so he's like, okay, this is not normal. So he hops off the interstate at an exit called Paris Road, speeds all the way down. Like, why his bike is wide open. We talking about New Orleans got bad streets too, dude. I'm not talking about like, you don't have streets that's smooth. You got potholes to where if you hit one of them, you're going to flip and die. His bike is wide open going down Paris Avenue. He gets to Marabou, and he feels like he's put enough space between him and this other bike. So he turns, pulls into somebody's driveway behind one of their, like where he's right next to one of their vehicles, clicks off his bike, clicks off his lights, and he's waiting for this other bike to zoom past him.
So he gets hiding. He's hiding in someone's yard, basically using the vehicle as coverage.
As
right?
cover, right? Yeah. And so he's waiting on his other bike to pass him up. And he said, man, it was no way it was humanly possible that this dude did this. He said, man, by the time I turned my bike off, flipped my helmet, the lid, like the visor on my helmet up and looked, this bike was zipping past me going down that street. And he said it was zipped past. He said it was a red and black motorbike. And he said, bro, it zipped past so quick. And he was like, it was ghostly because I heard it. He was like, but it didn't sound normal. He's like, normally when you hear a motorbike coming, you'll hit a zzzz, and when it gets to you and it passes, you hear vroom, like a loud noise because that's the sound passing you. And the sound from the exhaust is on the back end side. He was like, man, I heard it, but it wasn't as loud as it was supposed to be for a bike moving that fast. I was like, well, bro, what you did? He said, man, I backed out, went the other way, went up another street and got back on the interstate, and I got back to my neighborhood. He gets home, starts calling some of his other partners that left that same shooting. The other 3 people saw the exact same motorbike chasing all of them at the exact same time, right? So over the next few days, different motorbike riders, well, actually it was over the next month or so, different motorbike riders who were at the scene of that murder started dying on their motorbikes. One guy was in New Orleans East, and the police were trying to figure out why he was driving so fast, but he drove 120 miles an hour up a busy street called Bullitt Avenue, hit a light pole, flew up, his body flew up and hit another light pole and broke in half. That's how fast this man was going, right? Um, Another dude, I think that was a couple of days before. Yeah, that was a couple of days before August when Katrina started. Because I remember this one being in the news. This other dude is driving like 110 miles an hour on a motorbike, and in the news they said he was running from somebody. He ends up hitting a 18 wheeler and flipping into traffic and getting rolled over by a car. So all these different guys that were associated with that murder were being killed on their motorbikes, but it wasn't like anybody was shooting them or stabbing them. They were just having these horrific motorbike accidents. My partner Glenn stopped riding a motorbike, excuse me, at that point in time because he put two and two together that something was happening to everybody on
At
the
that
motorbike. So he stopped riding his
location,
bike.
right?
Yep,
Yeah, it must have taken how
stopped
many
riding the
times
motorbike.
for him to stop riding in that location?
He stopped riding. And
Jeez,
this is the crazy
in
thing.
general.
Glenn lives in Houston now with his family, and he won't ride a motorbike at all. And the crazy thing is, he told me, he's like, Jay, I feel like the minute I get on a motorbike again, whatever that is going to kill me. He's like, so I don't ride bikes. He still got his bike, but he won't ride it.
Damn. Damn. Okay. You know what? For I think we have we saw I saw here in the chat someone here. I believe someone who rides with the one percenters, someone who is with it. So I'm assuming that's someone in the bikers. So I'm assuming that person in here obviously hangs out with some of these motorcycle clubs, so they know exactly what it's like. And you know what? As a skydiver myself, a lot of my friends who jump are also riding bikes during the day. Literally, half of them are snorkeling, or not snorkeling, scuba diving in the water. The other half are riding the iron horses, and that's what they do on their way to the drop zone and on the way out all day long. That's what they like to do. They like to run with their in the packs, running and down the deserts on the way to the drop zones. But I could definitely see how if something like this is taken away from you, I can imagine if that many things happened in one place would fuck my mind up to the point of not wanting to do it anymore. I fear that would happen skydiving, and I don't want their a drop zone to be possessed of some bad shit happening, an omen that would cause any of us to start having serious accidents to the point that we start all just not jumping. That would be my concern. And I look at the just story you just told me about, Glenn, as what would I be doing if I was jumping and instead of going through that curve, that was my drop zone where I was landing. And I really that's the way I'm trying to get in with the story, sort of to catch up in his mind and try to be in the rider's seat with Glenn.
Right. Well, and Glenn and I go really far back, um, like after my senior year in high school, like we would go by his parents' house after school with two chicks and make out. So Glenn ain't the type to lie to me. That's how long I've known him. It's just that, we had differences of opinions on things, and he was out of town, so we didn't have a chance to really have a sit down, and I wasn't in a hurry to have a sit down with him either. Um, so I know he's not lying. He don't have a reason to lie. He's not that kind of person. And that's the crazy thing about getting stories. When I start getting local stories, which I'm really starting to get a lot more of them, it's a little bit scary to me because part of me doesn't want to part of me doesn't want to know some of the stuff that goes on around here. Like New Orleans is a creepy
Well,
place.
you've actually told me some stories that scared the shit out of me. You told me about Gator Man last time we talked. It might have been even two times ago, but that's something that really struck me because I've heard about Dogman, and you took it to a whole new level. But then you told me about Gator Man, and if I'm not mistaken, you were talking about right there in Louisiana, New Orleans, were you not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, man. It's like it's so much creepy and weird stuff that goes on down here. Like I prefer to know about what goes on away from here. I don't, because then I don't have to have it in the back of my mind and be like, oh, okay, this is the area where that exorcism was. You know what I'm saying? Oh, this is the street where the chick was vomiting blood on the street. Um, it's almost like I prefer not to not to know some things about this city. I really would prefer not to know some things about this city. But as I get more and more popular down here, like this weekend, I'm supposed to be doing a Comic Con down here. And of course, that's going to come with stories and people sharing their stories and telling me things.
You're
Get
not
more
that
and more popular.
far from Atlanta, where in Georgia they are filming, if I'm not mistaken, either the second half of season 11 of Walking Dead. My guess is Walking Dead is going to be a big part of Comic Con. It usually is when it's down here in San Diego.
Oh, it was this past year, Wizard Con. It was a huge part of Wizard Con. This is like the Bayou Comic Con that I'm gonna be at this weekend. Last year I was at Wizard Con, um, and that was The Walking Dead was a huge part of it. And the craziest thing is, dude, I never watched The Walking Dead, so there were people like, "Oh my God, you gotta go listen to the people talk about Walking Dead." I was like, "Bro, I've never watched one episode of Walking Dead. I just haven't."
It took several seasons before a friend of mine had me over under a guise of one reason, but it was to get me through two episodes, to get me hooked. And I swear to God, I stayed with her that night and we finished that season since it was already on demand and then went on to season two. And then I couldn't wait for the following season to start. But I gotta say, things kind of started changing a couple seasons ago when Negan got caught. I kind of liked Negan's character, the badass with Lucille, the baseball bat, with the wrapped around in barbed wire. He was the man, and now he was imprisoned in the last new season. I know he escaped from what I heard in this last episode, but then again, like I said, I haven't kept up with all the recent ones.
Yeah, and the only thing I knew about Negan was that Dave Chappelle did a skit about him.
Ha! Yeah.
And that was it. And I was like, okay, this is funny because it's Dave Chappelle, but I was like, I don't even know who the hell he's playing the skit about. But it was funny as hell because it was Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, yeah, he's the
So
man. He's the man. Always has been, too, since the 90s. And he's making a huge comeback on Netflix.
he needs to. We need comedy needs to come back. People need to stop being huge, giant vaginas and stop being so damn sensitive to where nobody can say anything and everybody's feelings gets hurt. And I'm proud to say that I called all this based on what I was seeing on YouTube because YouTube, the way people behave on YouTube is kind of a bellwether for the way other people behave as a whole. And the reason why I say that is because you're going to get a sample of the population on YouTube. And I remember when I first got started on YouTube and Twitter, I remember having these kind of flash mobs attacks where I would say something, everybody's like, "Oh, I can't believe you said that. I'm a feminist and that hurt my feelings." And it was like 100 people saying I was whatever it is, whatever you're supposed to be when you're anti-feminist. And I was like, look, it's a saying in New Orleans. That's what we say. And I'm sorry, you're gonna have to get over it because I'm gonna keep on saying it. I don't know what the hell is wrong with you. And it just got worse and it got worse and it got worse and it got worse. And so now everybody's panties all in a bunch to where you can't say anything, which to me is
Well,
just
you know what?
insane.
I'm so glad you brought that up. You're right. People need to start being pussies, and that's why I cuss and say fuck and shit all the time. And you know what? Since Trump came into office, he got the silent majority. Why? Because there were so many people afraid to say shit, and this guy was saying it. That's why I wrote in the chat, he's my new god. When he came, I think it was to Mississippi or maybe even Louisiana, and he was said the Trumps, the Dems are bullshit. Their investigation is bullshit, and he got applause from that stadium and worldwide. Whoever can do that in the highest office of man, the president of the United States, is really changing shit because we got to the point where, remember I mentioned earlier about that 7-year-old. This shit would not be happening 30 years ago. It's like, well,
Oh no.
okay, somebody, but don't get me wrong. I believe in human rights, but at the same time, I believe, let me have my own fucking right. I can say whatever the fuck I want. So can you. Anybody can. Say what you fucking want, people. Believe what you want. You don't want to believe it, then don't hear it. Don't listen to it. But don't stop someone from saying it. I'm a big believer in that. So, you know what? I'm
Oh
a
no,
I'm a
I'm
go
hundred
for
percent
that
on
to
board with you with that.
yeah, yeah. like you said, I'm glad that we're talking about Dave Chappelle because he talked about some things that normally people would not like to talk about. You remember that skit he did where he played the blind KKK member? Man, that shit was
I remember that.
funny.
That shit was hilarious. He
Yeah,
did that one,
if
and
that
then he
was
did
done by
the nigger
anybody
family.
else,
That shit was
yeah,
hilarious when he did
and
the nigger family.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
dude, it was hilarious.
And if anybody else had done that, they would have gotten condemned. But no, we gave him credit because he was a black man saying it, and it was a comedy stand-up. But he was making a satire, a satirical view on what was really happening to us. But he really brought it out and showed what. Hey, look, I'm gonna take what I see, and I'm gonna flip it and add a comedy skin to it. Oh, he was great, and that's why I'm glad to see him come back.
Well, no, I'm encouraged by what I see going on um, around America right now. I think that needs to be the political, like the PC culture has to go. That just doesn't work. Like, and give you an example. My sons go to a Catholic school here in New Orleans. In that school, they're taught to open the door for women. They pray every day at school. So when we go to the gym, which we train every morning at 4:30, uh, we went to the gym last Thursday. It's 4:30 in the morning. Two women come in. They hold the door open for one woman. She walks in and says, "Thank you." The other woman says, "You don't have to hold the door open for me. I'm a woman. I can hold the door open for myself."
Wow.
My oldest son looks at her and says, "No, you're a feminist, and that's your problem. I'm still a gentleman
He's
going
just
the
still a
door." We're
gentleman.
talking
That's
about a
right.
six. Yeah, we're talking about a 16-year-old young man, and he understands feminism, and he's like, "Yo, you crazy? I'm being a gentleman." And the minute men stop being gentlemen is when men become savages, and so now you got to worry about men beating women across the head and raping them and doing all kind of other stuff.
That's right.
The fact that men are gentlemen and still are gentlemen, like in New Orleans, man, we call women honey and baby and sugar and darling. And dude, I was in Dallas and I'm just being myself. I'm in the what do you call that fancy grocery store? It's a
Whole
Central Market.
Foods or something.
No, it was Central Market. And so
Okay.
I'm getting some salmon and I say, "Darling, how much is this salmon per pound?" And the lady looks at me like I done lost my mind.
Yeah, like she has this barrier, and
Yeah.
you're attacking it.
And I'm like, look, all I'm doing, I'm from the deep south. We call women honey, baby, darling, sweetheart. I mean, that's how we talk, and that's just how we talk. And we slur our words and we run our words together, and that's just how we talk, but people take offense to it. And I just think it's time for people to grow up. It's like we're regressing as human beings to where it's just like, man, come on, if you can't take a joke, if somebody can't say something that offends you, and then
Yeah, if
you
you
know,
can't laugh with it, then something's wrong with that person, with you, right? You know what I'm
mm,
saying?
mm,
And one thing I've noticed is you look at our history. The people whose parents came out of World War II, they were the real people who you could be real with, have a beer with, and you could tell a joke to, and they treated a woman with respect and vice versa. And then we had the Vietnam generation, same thing. You had that kind of camaraderie where back home there were the respect in the military that was given to them, and they had to show to their superiors was shown to the civilization on their civil side when they came back to the states. The baby boomers. Then after I said the Nam generation, it just seems to me that the people who I know who got back from Iraq or Afghanistan, even my brother who's come back from Kuwait, he has no idea what the fuck they've been fighting for anymore. And he might, and man, mind you, and I remind everybody, he's over there fighting for Uncle Sam using a private military corporation. Big money, good money, and
mm-hmm.
they're using that swamp money to get a shitload of them and pay them good money to live in those deserts out there and train some of the locals out there too. And they got the best shit paid for by Uncle Sam. And again, he just wonders why things have changed so differently. What the generation, because he's now 38, so if he had stayed in commission, he would have been much further than he was when he was honorably discharged and went into private corporations. But something needed to happen, and I don't know what that is, but I know our generation hasn't have it, and I'm worried that the generation beneath us, your kids seem to have gotten it right, which is
Oh
a
no, my
start.
kids' generation. So the way it works is, and what I'm seeing is, so got a millennial generation, which they're pretty much socialist, freaking retards. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with them.
Yeah,
Honestly,
yeah.
I don't. My son's generation under them, oh my god, those kids are like, yo, like my son
Wake
will
up,
come into
fuck
with
up.
the news and be like, yo, dad, you see this dude at the library with the kids with the dress on? Like, what is
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
Like,
The
this is
7-year-old.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
And they know. My son is like, yo, dad, you really need to stop. He's the one that told me, he said, dad, you can't take that Prilosec anymore because Prilosec is causing cancer. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah, look, here's the research. I was like, wow, okay. All right, well, what should I take? He was like, you need to get CBD oil. It works. All right, I'll give me some CBD oil. So they're more informed, and they have a better understanding. And the reason why is because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when the pendulum swings that far to the left, it swings for much
Back to
further
the
back to the
right.
right.
Yeah,
And that's what
yeah.
I've been like. And I have my fiance is a hairdresser, so she has a huge, like this huge swath of gay friends and homosexual friends, and so we all hanging out drinking.
Yeah, yeah.
And I tell them stuff like, I'm like, look, we're talking about like couples that are married and they're cool and they cool. And I'm like, look, you guys got to really be careful with the LBGT movement because now it's moving towards
Yeah.
pedophilia.
Scary
And
that
I
they
said,
fucking added a P for pedophile. What the fuck
yeah.
is going
And I
on
tell
with
them, I
that?
said, you guys' movement was all about you being treated equal. And I said, you got equal rights, you got marriage, you got this, you got that. I said, now your movement getting hijacked by people doing crazy stuff. And I said, nobody else can speak about it except for people that are gay to stop it. I said, if you guys don't stop it, when the pendulum swings back around and this gigantic freaking metal ball is on it, it's going to whack the hell out of you because everybody's going to be like, yo, messing with people, children. You got men participating in women's sports, talking about they freaking women. Women they don't have any sports to themselves. And I'm telling them, I said, look, when the pendulum swings back and this gigantic wrecking ball comes back across, because you guys, as the normal lesbian and gays, are not saying, hold on, this shit's going too far. We need to put the brakes on it. I said, you're gonna get wrecked. I said,
I've
you're gonna get
noticed
wrecked because
even
we're
amongst
proud of it.
them, they even realize what some of the rest are doing that's giving them a bad name. And they know it too.
Oh no, they know. They know
Yeah.
because they're sitting there saying, yo, this is going too far. I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's going
yeah.
too far, but you gotta say something about it.
That's right. Do something about it. Do something.
You
Set
gotta
an
say something
example
about
for it.
So um so it's one of those things to where, it has to a lot of stuff has to change and it's gonna change. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna change. And I love all people from all races. I don't care about your sex, your gender. I don't really give a damn. Like I told people before, I knew about like transgenders and transsexuals before it was popular because I had to pay for some tuition for my kids, so I did some illegal activities, and I would be at bars where those people were, pretty much feeding some of their bad habits, and that's all the people that were there. So I mean, I never had, I've hung around them, I know who they are, I know some of the more prominent ones down here, and it's always been a cool crowd of people. But even what I see now is not what I saw then. Like those people had like rules of engagement with stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like what I
Yes.
see going on now across the board is just like, what the hell is this? And I guarantee you, if I go back to those same bars where they are, they'd be like, "What's up, Big J? What's going on? How you been?" And they probably gonna be like, "What the hell? What the hell is this?" So, um, it's one of those things to where, from a political standpoint and a spiritual standpoint, there's a lot going down right now that some of it needs to change. Some of it's fine, but some of it really needs to change.
Well,
And I think it all starts with the
I'm with you, and I've been raised this way. I don't care what race you are, what gender you are, what language you speak, what the color of your skin. I don't care. I don't care how much you're worth, even. Right? I care what you make, how you are to other people. And when you fuck with kids, you're at the bottom of my goddamn pole.
Yeah, I can't. The kid thing, man. But that's why I say when you know when it's messing with kids, it's true evil. You know what I'm saying? It's evil when it's messing with kids. It's 100% evil when it's starting to target kids, and that's what scares me. Um, and that's what really bothers me. But in the end, I think it'll all work itself out because there's going to be a pushback on it, and you start to see it. The simple fact that it's so prevalent and it's so in everyone's face, especially this case with this little boy, it put it in everybody's face to where they can see it. You know, the world is seeing that, and they're like, "Nah, that's not cool." You know, people who only read headlines, which I work with a lot of people who don't really read the news. They only watch headlines and read the headline of the paper, and then they make their decision off the headline. Like they see that and say, "Hold on, what the hell is this?" And they'll come to me like, "Yo, Jay, what's this about this little boy? Mom trying to make him into this." They're like, "Yeah, you need to read the whole story. It's kind of foul." Then they'll go back and read and be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that's going on." So once it gets to that level where people are seeing it and it's in front of their faces, then change is going to happen because most people are kind of asleep. They read a headline here, they're worried about paying their light bill, their phone bill, they got a car note, they got to get the kids back and forth, and so they're busy with their daily life, and then their head will pop up when something major happens.
You
But
remember
people are
that
starting to
movie
see it.
Spotlight won Academy Award for Best Picture a couple years ago?
The one with the priests that were raping the children.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes. And if it wasn't for the Spotlight team in Boston to do their 6 long month, year-long investigation about the church covering up, going up to the Pope, which at the very end it shows cities which the Catholic Church has settled with plaintiffs against the church, and they are cities across the world. I mean, there are no cities you could hide from that this hasn't happened. It took something like that to unearth things and to start to make things to a better. Now, I know some friends who I went first of all. I went to a Catholic school for high school. I went to two of the high schools I went to Catholic. One was Baptist, one was public, so there was no school denomination there. Two of the law schools I went to were Jesuit. The university I went to before that for my bachelor's was just a UC. The point being is I obviously had that background and I know those friends, and they even themselves have seen the change but said it's still not quite enough because it's gotten to the Pope, for God's sakes. And once that Pope goes out, when it's the next Pope's turn, whatever you want to call it, the reign, the pontifical reign, things will probably change, and change will probably come with the wind.
Well, and you know, when you start talking about that activity, so two things: the declassification that just came out from the federal government like 2 days ago, specifically talked about Philadelphia and what they were doing in Philadelphia. And then, like in my community, in the black community, it's like always been a known thing. Like, don't let your kid be an altar boy because them priests mess with the little boys. Like I remember I went to Catholic schools my whole life. I went to a school called St. Leo the Great down here. I remember telling my mom, I want to be an altar boy. And in the car, she's like, boy, don't you know them priests be raping them little boys? You ain't about to be no damn altar boy.
Yeah,
I was
see,
like, what?
she knew. We didn't know
Like,
until
what?
after I left. You know what I'm saying? And I'm lucky because I was an altar boy at a Greek Orthodox church where in Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, you can't be a priest from a deacon without being a married person first. You can't be, if you want to rise the ranks and reach the level of one of the five patriarchs, you have to stay celibate. But for the most part, all priests have a wife. So the church I was attending, they're not fucking little boys because they're fucking their wives. And so when I
That's what
started
they
going
need to
to,
have a
yeah,
wife.
exactly, right? That's where the whole thing starts. And so when I speak to people who are still going to church, the Catholic Church, and they constantly see that same priest being moved from parish to parish, there's a reason. And usually that reason is down to something as bad as what we're talking about.
I don't even understand from a church Christian standpoint how you can preach family and love if you're not experiencing family. So if you're not I don't want to go to someone to advise me on how to deal with my family if you've never been
And
married
then
and
I
have
have
a
no.
family.
That's true.
Like,
That's
how the hell
true.
are you going to advise me? Like, I mean, I know that the spirit of God is supposed to lead you, but come on, man, you don't. I wouldn't even go to you. Like, you can't talk to me about how to deal with a wife who's having
Someone
problems
doesn't
and
have a
issues if you
wife.
don't have a
Yeah,
wife.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
It's very
so
true. You can't read it
um,
out of a
for
book
me,
either.
yeah, so for me, it just that just didn't make any sense. So, but I think they should be able to have wives. That way, whatever urges they have will be satisfied, and you won't have any of that foolishness. And again, I think it goes back to just being pure evil. And I'm pretty sure that's because there have been Satanists who invaded the church, and they're using those kids for rituals and doing whatever the hell they want to do. And
Yes,
unfortunately,
Satanists, New World Orders. What I hear a lot with Pope Francis, he's definitely a communist. The message he's bringing sends things of the leftist New World Order. I don't know what you want to call it, the Trilateral Commission. There are different names, but he's one of those that's pushing that envelope for the New World Order.
yeah, well, that's because you got it's kind of sad, but it really goes back to what my friend was telling me about various different organizations that are vying for power across the globe. The average person looks at what goes on. They look at the news, and I honestly, Dr. J, I wish I could look at the news like I used to and not see it for what it is. Unfortunately, these guys have ripped the blinders off of me to where when I read the news, it's like, wait, this happened in Kuwait. Wait, this is happening in
Yeah, no,
Syria. This is
I
happening
watched
like
something on ABC. I put on One American News. It's a whole different story. They're showing one side of OAN, the right side, the conservative side, and the truthful side. I go to CNN, and it is so full of shit. You have a CNN whistleblower that's come out recently. Have you heard about that?
I
He's
thought I saw
somebody
something
who's
about that
come
a
out
whistleblower.
from paid for La Veritas, the group, the Truth Organization, and they've infiltrated the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, and they talked to somebody in the IRS who says they pushed through to get their filing for DSA much further because they're trying to advance socialism, even though they can't answer who the fuck's going to pay the healthcare for all premiums. And then you also have uh, the point it's just fucking it's they're liars. CNN, Don Lemon being the main anchor who hosts the premium 5 p.m., 8 p.m. Eastern News. He was in one of the meetings along with the CEO and COO of CNN, and they were all showing complete partisan bias. Well, you know what? If they're partisan bias, then how are they supposed to be media? Media is supposed to be showing us the news. How can it be the news if it's filtered through a liberal lens?
Well, no, that's because the media is co-opted. Um, I discovered that after Hurricane Katrina. That was that was when I realized that the media had to have talking points. Um, and I realized that those talking points, especially it was when they started calling people refugees, and it was across all media, CNN,
Oh yeah,
MSNBC,
yeah,
Fox
that's
News.
right.
Remember that?
We
And
had
it
Katrina
was
refugees in California, and that dominated the news cycle because we
right,
received so many people whose homes were displaced.
right. But American citizens aren't refugees. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah,
Like,
you can't
and
really say
I
that
was
about
sitting there
neighbors.
watching
Yeah.
it, and I was like, get the hell out of here, man! Like across the board, every station, the refugees, the refugees, the refugees, and I'm like, yo, these are American citizens who lost everything, and you call them refugees? And the way it was being said pissed me off. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, okay, something's up because there's no way that there was the same talking point. So then you see from election to election, prior to Donald Trump being president, there was the same talking points. It's just more prevalent now where you can see that across stations, it's like, wow, everybody's saying the same thing. Like somebody handed them a piece of paper and said, look,
And read this. Yeah.
read this across all local TV stations and all
World news,
national TV
international
stations.
news, national news. Yeah, they same shit.
Yeah, so it goes to show that that media is under the control of someone, and that's how you know it's all the same talking points. I remember being a kid; it wasn't that way. I remember, was it Ted Koppel, and there was the people that came on at night, and they would just talk about the news. They would talk about what was going
Journalists,
on. It
yeah,
was real
yeah.
journalists. It wasn't leaning one way or the other. It was just pure news talking about what was going on. And I think once we got to the 24-hour news cycle, which is where we are now, um,
You
is
know,
just
have you
getting
ever seen
abused.
that movie Vice, where Christian Bale plays Dick Cheney? They
No, I haven't
talk
seen.
about a law that was the formation for what came to be Fox News. And they said, okay, there was a line that I think Christian Bale says to, I don't remember the part. What the scene has to do with him basically saying that the creation allows them to have Fox doing their talking for them. And from that going point on, once you had Fox, you open up the other news to show the other side. So of course, with the political spectrum swinging to the what came after that, the Obamas, and you have the leftist media come. Then it comes back. Only unfortunately, when it comes back, Fox News isn't quite the same. So now they're bringing on socialist commentators. They're hosting town halls for socialist, candidates, things like that. So it's all skewed. The point is, that's why I think One America is really prevailing. They were a really small network, and I really didn't discover them until a couple of years ago. And I think their popularity has risen because they're acknowledging who our president is and what he's done, and he in turn has acknowledged them enough times where they've actually created sound bites and or video points of him taking questions from them and actually acknowledging, saying, hey, thank you for your network, and being honest about the news, something we don't normally see. And that's something kind of shocking, because it's pretty sad when you have to thank a network for actually doing their job, and their whole job is supposed to be reporting. Shouldn't all networks be the same way?
Yeah, I think all networks should be the same way, but they're not going to be that way because that's not how it's devised and that's not how it's set up. It's set up and organized to where talking points go out and they're designed to influence the opinions of people, and that's why we saw the mass demonetization and the mass censoring of people online. And I honestly, my YouTube page, the Dark Waters channel, which I pray regularly on the Dark Waters channel, I can go back and pinpoint the video where I saw a 75% reduction in revenue on YouTube, and it was the day after I released a prayer.
Wow.
And I remember looking at it, and I said, I went live on a stream, and I said, guys, I'm getting ready to start building my own platform because YouTube is getting ready to start censoring people. And after that, it was on. I mean, then you just saw across the board censorship. And the reason why they're doing that is because now everybody's a reporter. Now everyone
The cell
everyone
phone.
has
Everyone
an
with the cell
yeah.
phone has access to being a reporter. That's true.
And so now the narrative and the talking points are no longer controllable because just like there's 40 something people in this chat with different opinions, um, any one of those people, I find it funny because trolls always like to troll people on online, but they never start their own channels, but they like to troll people.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
even the
it's true.
trolls can start their own little thing, and start talking about and stating their opinions and kind of get in the arena. And what I mean by in the arena, it's one thing to comment about something and pretend like you're big and bad when you comment, and it's another thing to actually put yourself out there and state your opinions and have them verbally to where people can go back and listen to them and try and take them and misconstrue them. But we're in a society right now where that's possible, so there's no way that the mainstream media can have their talking points and people believe them because there's too many outlets for information to get out. And that's the most important part about what's going on. And as long as that's there, then I think America will be fine and America will be safe. Of course, there's going to be little problems, skirmishes, and people worried about racism and people worried about sexism and feminism and people who feelings get hurt when you say anything. But that's always been around. The only difference is now there's this megaphone called social media where you have people who have the ability to bitch and moan and rat and rave, and also
And
simultaneously
hide, right? That's one thing I
hide,
noticed.
and
They
then
hide behind a computer. I'm like, what the fuck? It's like if you're going to be a bully, at least show yourself. Don't make a fake name and a fake account and go show up in someone else's storm or palace, that or sandbox, whatever you want to call it.
yeah, and then not only that, but it's a little bit more than just that. What I've experienced and what I thought was very funny, Dr. J, and I think I should probably speak to this because it's affected a lot of people in the paranormal field. So when I had my problem with trolls, when it first started happening, um, I couldn't figure out where it was coming from because it just didn't make any sense. Like I never really say anything that's that far out, the box that is so offensive. I never really started anything with anyone. I only finish things. So when someone starts something, I reply, and normally it's a vicious, all-out attack on that person who attacked me. But what I discovered was, after really doing investigating, like when I find a troll, I write down their name, I'll give it to my team, they'll start researching. I discovered that it was always one or two people with multiple accounts. And so you would see this massive incoming, right? Where it's like 50, 60, 70, 80 comments, 20, 30, 40 people in a chat, but it's actually only, 5 or 10 people with different computers from one IP address that are just commenting and trying to influence you in a certain way. And I've said this to people who are on YouTube and in the paranormal industry over and over and over again. Um, lions are not concerned about the opinions of sheep. And so the best thing for you to do is just keep on doing what you do. Those people are going to be there regardless. They're going to say what they got to say. But if it wasn't for you entertaining them, they really wouldn't have anything to talk about. So my advice to everybody, and I've said this to Heather, I've said this to everybody that has trolls is, man, you just keep on doing you, because at the end of the day, it's a part of the process and they're a part of the game. So I use the trolls, and the trolls make me a lot of money. I made so much money off trolls. It's ridiculous.
Well, I
I'm
got a
always
good
looking
army
for.
here, the Blue Crew. They're definitely doing the part of, it's dealing with the trolls, and there's a good people here with trenches. I handpicked them, and they're damn good people. Justin T is leading the pack. There's Pyramid 7. I know I also have a few others in here. Other nights, Rockstar's also in here. But like I said, tonight, the biggest moderators I have would literally be Justin T and Pyramid 7.
No, I'm with you, but I do want to address something in the chat because I want to clarify something that somebody was saying. I do believe that because one of your, I'm gonna call this person a troll, is trying to misconstrue something I'm saying. But to be clear, I do believe that the violence in the black community is a spiritual problem. It's a spiritual problem. It's a socioeconomic problem. It's a family problem where there's no black fathers in the community. So since there's no black men in the community, no one's raising their boys to be men. And women are emotional, so they're growing up in a household full of women. So everything that they do is act out emotions. My sons are raised with me, so when they're around young men who are raised with their mothers, they behave and act differently. They're not emotional. They're logical and they're calm. And now they will beat the shit out of you. And they will, if you pull a gun on them, they've been trained to take it from you. But there's a different mentality that they have because there's a father in the household. That stems
Yes.
back to certain things that were done to the black community, specifically done by the Democratic Party to the black community, that led to.
Yes, yes,
So,
and the left,
um,
they refused to remember who liberated them from slavery. It was the
right.
Republicans.
But and so when I say it's a socioeconomic problem, it's a family problem, and it's a spiritual problem. Black people used to be extremely conservative, extremely religious, and we didn't have those problems in our community when it came to violence, single parent households, and all the rest of that. As we move further away from God, this is what the result has been. So across the board, it's problems across the board. Um, and so I speak exactly what I mean, and I mean exactly what I say. So I don't mix my words, and I don't mince my words. What I was referring to earlier was what one of the gentlemen was sharing with me, which is my one of my confidants I'm one of his confidants was about interdimensional beings being in communities, which kind of falls into the exact same line where he said there was an interdimensional infestation in black communities, which was a spiritual extra dimensional infestation of these kind of bugs that were there that provoked violence and fed off, not didn't provoke violence, but fed off the violence. And then he went further into the fact that there's some demarcation lines in communities where they're there and they're not. And that you go into some black communities and they're not there. But those are the black communities that tend to be a little bit more affluential, who have fathers in the household with the mothers, and it's a family unit. So that's his opinion, and that's what he's kind of shared with me. But it makes sense to a certain extent because of the simple fact that we see the outcomes of those different things. So I just want to clarify that because people like
Here's
to take stuff
something that's been written
out of
twice. Let me get
context.
your context on this. This is from Manuel Silva. He wants to ask you what you think about Bill Clinton's son, Danny Williams, in the black community. The son that he denies having.
Yeah, I know about Danny Williams.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at Danny clearly looks like
He
it's his
looks
son.
like him. Yeah, he does.
You
Side by
can't.
side
You,
photo. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Dan. If that ain't that man's son, I don't know what it is to it. I think Danny did the right thing by trying to draw attention to himself. I don't know whatever happened to Danny after that. He got really, really quiet. So I don't know if he got an opportunity to sit down with his father or not. But
Well, I know
um,
Roger Stone has written a book on him. I know that he's taken him to the RNC, the DNC. He's definitely had support from Roger Stone and Alex Jones, and they've tried to give awareness to Bill Clinton. I don't think Bill's have a chance to actually accept the idea, or if he has, he would try to shut the idea out because if it's true, it's going to prove another marital affair.
well, I don't. As far as the black community is concerned, it got to the black community that he had that came out. People know. So as far as politics is concerned, that's going to be kind of a albatross that is hanging around the neck for a long time. Um, but I've never been a fan of the Clintons. I have a lot of friends that are in jail because of the Clinton crime bill. A lot,
Yes,
lot
yes.
of friends that are in jail because of Clinton. I'm just not a fan. I've never been a fan of theirs. Um, so when we start talking about my community, one of the things that really adversely affects this community has been a lot of the policies that the government's put in place, and it's been across Democrat and Republican presidential, governments. But a lot of those different laws and rules and regulations have adversely affected my community. So even though I am a black Christian conservative, I still have the ability to understand and see through what is really going on.
And you see
And
what's happened through the history, especially through living through your eyes, through
yeah,
your community, of what you've seen and changed.
yeah, and it's one of those things. Now, one of the guys in the chat is saying, "How do we raise our consciousness and fend from interdimensional infestations?" In my opinion, prayer is the way you do it. And I'll give you an example. Do we need to go, Dr. J? Or we could just keep
Now,
talking. And
keep you can go as long as you're ready. Whenever you're ready, we keep going.
I'll share this with you guys. So I think I've kind of talked to you about this, Jay, a little bit, but um, and I'm pretty sure I touched on this the last time, just a little. There was a time period over the past 24 months um, where I would get these phone calls. And maybe I didn't tell you this. So I was getting these phone calls from different people, different voices, male voice, female voice, teenage kid voice, male voice, old male voice. Um, and it was this different voices, but they all were continuing one conversation with me. And it got to the point to where after the third phone call, I finally said, well, who is this that I'm talking to? And the conversation started off like this. It was, hello, can I speak to James? It was a very well-spoken male voice the very first time. And this is on my regular phone line. This is not on the Dark Waters phone line. So I have the Dark Waters phone line, then I have my regular phone. I don't give my regular phone out to anybody. And then I change all my numbers consistently. So the phone number that I have now won't be the same phone number next year, right? So, and then I'll give out the new number to people who need it. So,
That way you can
guy,
control who has it, so it's not being
yeah, that's why I
sold to
control who
random
has it.
people. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Um, so guy says, "Hey, can I speak to James?" And I'm like, "This is James." And he's like, "Well, I just wanted to call and tell you that um, we are aware of what you're doing, and that God doesn't love you, and that He's going to turn His back on you." And hangs up the phone. Click. I'm like, okay, what the fuck is that bullshit about, right? But I was in the middle of doing something. I think I might have been in Dallas, like sitting on a balcony smoking a cigar with my girl, drinking wine. So I was like, whatever, some bullshit. About a week later, it's an older white lady that calls and picks up the conversation. And she says, "We told you God is going to turn his back on you. You can pray all you want, but he's not going to save you." Click, hangs up the phone. So this
Ooh,
goes on. When it gets to the
jeez.
third conversation,
That
it's
second conversation, I would have been already scared.
no. So the third conversation, I finally, when it started talking, I said, "Well, who is this?" And there's this silence on the phone, but then it's kind of this little whispering, like, pss, 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 pss. But then there's silence. I said, "Oh, I get it. You feel like you're going to intimidate me because I talk about Christ to the public, right?" And because I could feel it at that point in time, and it just so happened to be the third time that this phone call came. I was literally, it was almost like God made me sit still to receive this phone call, because I was sitting outside my apartment smoking a cigar, and I was playing this little stupid video game called it's a little block video game. What's the name of it? It's on this phone now. It's called
Tetris?
Woody. I was playing Woody.
Okay.
So I was playing Woody. And you know how you're supposed to be getting out of the car and you're fumbling around and you just get distracted, these cell phones. So I'm just sitting there playing Woody, smoking a cigar, windows rolled up, and the phone rings while it's in my hand. And so now there's no distraction, and spiritually I can feel what's going on. I said, "Oh, I get it. Because I talk about Christ on all my radio interviews, you feel like you going to intimidate me." Well, let me tell you, I'm not about to be intimidated by whoever you are, whatever you are. I said, "I'm not worried about it." I said, "I'm not even going to fight you. I'm going to let God fight you." I said, "I've learned that it's not my battle, it's his." The phone hangs up. Click. 2 days later, and I might have never told you that part, but 2 days later, I get a phone call from, um, this prophet and it's like, the way it started was, says that someone has put in an urgent prayer request for you, and we want to pray for you. It's like a pre-recorded thing. So, you know, we want to pray for you. And I'm like, and it's after the beep, just tell us what you need prayer on. I'm like, all right, just pray for me. And I hang up the phone. Click. After that, I start getting a series of phone calls from this phone number, and every time it's been a prophet, and he would prophesy what was going to happen in my life within 2 weeks. Like, I got
Ooh.
the phone call today. Phone call today said, "There's something that you're working on that's getting ready, that fell through," right? And when I discovered is what it says fell through, either it's something that I'm working on now that's fell through already, or it's going to fall through within the next 2 weeks or next week. And then the voice message says, "But don't worry about it. God has you covered. He understands what's going on with it. It's a temporary delay. Just stay focused on what's going on." Now, I give you something really personal. The last phone call I got, it said, God is working on something around your name that you've been struggling with for a long time. He's been aware of you being diligent and good and taking care of it, but there's other things trying to hold you back, and he's going to stop it right now. He's going to fix it immediately. That next day, I get a call from a friend of mine. I've known this guy, coach his kids in baseball. I've known this guy for maybe like 7 years. She says, "Jay, I got a guy who can do credit repair. You and I have been talking about, you need to get your credit score up so you can buy real estate again. Got a guy who can do it. It's going to cost $1,000. I'm not asking you for any money. I'm going to pay for it. I want to do it because I want to see if it's going to work for you." He was like, "But if it works for you, I want to sell it. But He's like, you've done so much for me and my family over the years. I'm going to pay for it, and we're going to see if it works, right? So I'm like, part of me is like, nah, I'm going to pay for it. Then the little voice in the back of my mind says, no, let him pay for it. Be quiet, shut up. And he's like, all right. I'm like, okay, bro. Hang up the phone. 2 days later, he calls me back. He said, bro, okay, bro, it's all paid for. We're going to check your credit report in 7 days. In 7 days, we check it. My credit scores went up by like 200 points. Yeah,
Wow. In a
136 points
week?
in a week.
Wow.
So then he says, my partner's on the phone. He says, man, it's not where it's supposed to be. We need to give it another week, and it's going to go up some more. So another week passes, and we pull it again. And now all my credit scores are in the 700s, right? And you got to understand how significant that is for me, Jay, because before Katrina hit, I owned 32 pieces of property. I owned a mortgage company, a construction company, insurance company. So Katrina hitting me and wiping out my clientele, it wiped out millions of dollars for me,
Oh yeah,
like future
easy
projected income.
destroyed.
Right?
That's
It
not you weren't
destroyed.
insured either, right? Because
Well,
I
some
don't
of it
think
I
they
was insured, but
expected.
you can't insure a client base. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
can insure
yeah.
a property, but you can't insure a client base. So um it wiped me out. When I say it wiped me out, man, it wiped me completely the hell out. And so for that score to jump like that within 2 weeks puts me in a position to move on some other things. Because I had a business partner of mine that we were having a very rough time, and I talked about all this publicly. And that's why, and I talk about God like this publicly because people need to know. Like he and I were having a very rough time. This business partner started practicing hoodoo, right? I mean, he literally was, I mean, hardcore hoodoo. And I would go by his house, and he would be angry, and he would say stuff like, I would walk by his little hoodoo altar, and I would take a look, and he would have like the Crown of Success candles. He would have fast money candles, and anytime he lit one of those candles, dude would make money, right? Because that's how it works. But I would look at it, and I would never scoff at it because I'm not judgmental or anything like that because I'm as crooked as Vegas, so I can't judge anybody. But I would just say, bro, I need you to chill, man. God got us. And he's like, nah, man, fuck that. God don't really care about us, da da da. And he would just spaz out. And so I remember leaving his house and getting in the car, and I was like, well, I think I'm gonna have to leave this dude alone. The voice in my head said, no, he's got to go through his process like you got to go through your process, right? And so over time, things start happening. And he calls me and he says, hey, man, I got an opportunity for us to go and, get $20,000 a month in rental income, blah, 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 blah. But we need our scores to be here. We need to have about $750,000 line of credit, blah, 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 blah. Well, on his end, all these things have been lining up, right? Because we did we did a whole bunch of praying on his end to break curses and all the rest of that. Things started lining up. So he's getting in line to take this trip to go get this money, but I'm out of line. And so within 2 weeks, I jumped from terrible credit to being in line to go on a plane to go with him to literally get as much money as I will ever need. You know what I'm saying? So, um, and I share that story with people because when I started this interview, I said that people believe that we're shown the darkness to be because people, like the dark side is seductive. No, the darkness is only there to point to the light. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
Yes.
not there for you to dwell in the darkness. It's not there for you to just be completely seduced by it. It's there to point to the light. And once you see the light, you know where you need to be. Now, if you choose to be in the darkness, I don't judge you for choosing to be in the darkness. That's your life, your decision, your spirit, your soul, your vibration, whatever the hell that is your choice. You got free will. But that's not the purpose of the dark. The dark is only there to validate the light. So we go through dark times. Like I talk to people who've been suicidal. And when I say suicide, I mean I've talked to people who are straight up like they call me and they're 100% suicidal on the dark waters line. Like, yo, I'm gonna kill myself.
Jeez. Wow.
And like people don't understand the stuff I do. Like, yo, I want to kill myself. You know what I'm saying? Because this is how I feel, and this is that, and this is that, and my life is like this. And I'm like, all that stuff is temporary. Don't make a permanent decision on a temporary situation. And I share these stories with people. When I first started sharing paranormal stories, I was sharing them from that perspective of I'm sharing the darkness because people are attracted to it. It took for me to understand a long time for me to understand why, out of all the people in the world, people call me religiously. Like I turned the Dark Waters phone number off recently because it wouldn't stop freaking ringing. And it's just like, dude, I can't answer all these phone calls. But then I realized, wait. You were chosen to convert people from the dark to the light. You were chosen because when people, a suicidal person calls you, you're going to stop and say, hey, man, don't kill yourself. Somebody else just hang up on them. You'll stop. And I've done it over and over and over and over again. I've done it where my girlfriend was waiting for us to go to dinner. She'd be like, babe, we supposed to be going to dinner. I'm like, nah, this dude talking about killing himself, babe. Let's hold on for a second. Let me talk to him. You know what I'm saying? So I say all that to say, and I'm not talking about bragging about myself. I'm just making a point that this paranormal stuff that we're all into, it has a higher purpose. It has a greater purpose. And once you discover it and start transitioning it and helping people to see the greater purpose, to see the greater good in it, then they'll understand. They'll understand when that thing crawls in the bed with them at night, why they shouldn't be afraid. They'll understand when they see that oil man next to them, they were allowed to see that thing. It was allowed for them to see it. It didn't just come to you. It don't have the power just to come and dominate you. It was allowed to be there for a reason. You know what I'm saying? And that's what people have to understand. It takes a lot. It took a lot of maturity and growth for me to get to this point to understand that all these things are allowed to happen, and then you make a decision from that point moving forward, you know?
And the more informed you are, the better decisions you're going to make.
Absolutely. That's why it's good to listen to shows like this and understand that information. But some people go chasing the darkness, and it's not a good thing for them. But they do it anyway. Where's my cigar, Dr. J?
Yeah, that's why I'm lighting my own cigarette. Well, listen, I think it's a good time to plug in your own special in the album you're dropping.
Sure. So the name of the album is called Adonai. It's 10 stories, 10 phenomenal stories. One of them is about the Burnt Church Bigfoot, which is a Bigfoot encounter. One of them is a Gabonese dogman encounter that happened in Africa.
Ooh.
Um, One of them is a cornfields. It's titled Cornfields, which I still haven't figured out what this thing is that these people saw. A husband and a wife were in Iowa, and they stopped at this little restaurant called Crossroads Diner and Grill. And across from that restaurant were these cornfields, and the husband was on the way back to the vehicle um, to get her, kind of they were leaving, and she had to run back in and get her cell phone. He hits the light on a car. You know how you unlock your car and the lights light up? He hits the light on his cars to unlock the doors, and it lights up the cornfields, and he sees across from him in these cornfields this freaking creature that was kind of grayish, blackish, shoulders and head taller than a cornstalks. And it's standing there, but it's got his head turned away from them. When his wife comes back out and he's trying to get her to get to the car, and she starts arguing and fussing and fighting and like, stop pulling on me. This thing looks towards them and the light hits its eyes. And I've never heard of this eye shine. I'm still trying to figure out what this is. But the eye shine is this white ring. I mean, it's purple ring with a white dot in the middle of it. And I've never heard of anything like that at all. So that's one of the stories on the album. It's a bunch of them. I can't remember them all at this
10
point.
total, right? Out of 30?
10 total. Yeah, 10 total. And then I'll drop the other out. After those 10 are out, I'll just start drop. Those are the best in my opinion. After that, I'll start dropping the rest. But it was supposed to be 30. It was supposed to be a 3-part album called Adonai, Jah, and another name of God. But I just wanted to do the best 10 for Halloween. So probably the day after, probably that following Thursday, I'll do another 10. And then the Thursday after that, I'll do another 10.
And this can be found on your website, iamdarkwaters.com, right?
Yep.
Well, if you have a final statement, let's say it. If there's anything else you want to address to anyone that you've seen anything, the floor is yours, my friend.
No, I just appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate your friendship. And people don't understand how in the paranormal world, people are finicky. and I just appreciate you being a friend.
Oh,
It's one of
amen. I
those things.
appreciate you too, and I appreciate you coming on here and always enlightening us and also bringing the stories of what you've seen and heard from all those others. They need a voice. Some of those people who go through those very dark experiences don't talk about it much. They don't have someone to speak to. And because of that, we don't hear as much as happening. You mentioned earlier is a lot of the great stories happen in Africa, and the people just don't talk about it for reason that being that people don't believe. Well, why do you think a lot of I'm saying this when I say you, why do you believe? I'm saying to everybody out there. Why does everyone believe that all the voodoo and everything that came to Haiti, where did it originate from?
Yeah,
Africa.
it came from
They got
Africa.
a whole
Yep.
that's the whole continent right there. You got how many countries in that whole continent that have thousands and thousands, if not millions of years of crazy shit that's been happening that they could tell you for lifetimes.
I tell you what, if you want to find out some crazy stuff, look up Cradle Mutwa in Africa. Just YouTube Cradle Mutwa, and he
Cradle
talks about,
Mud Wa. I'm writing that
and he
down.
talks
Mud Wa.
about. Yep, he's one of the oldest African. I wouldn't call him occultist, but secret society initiates. He's probably one of the last ones that's around. And the rituals that he went through were equivalent to the rituals that skinwalkers went through, Native Americans went through to become skinwalkers, which was killing a family member and eating their own flesh. And he talks about
Yes,
those
cannibalism.
rituals. Um, and once he went through those rituals, the knowledge that he was given. And it's crazy because just recently, they came out with an article talking about how the Garden of Eden was in Africa and where it was specifically in Africa. But he talks about pre-Diluvian creatures that are still around in Africa, and that when he became a member of that secret society, he was actually introduced to some of those creatures, and it's insane because some of them are lizards and some of them are kind of uh, leopards and all kind of crazy stuff. But what is interesting is whether you look at him or some of the other information that's coming out, and this stuff has been out a long time, but some of the other information that's finally coming out is only validating what Credo was talking about years ago. And I think Credo was talking about this 11 years ago, 12 years ago. So for me, getting stories out of Africa has only been because of me being Dark Waters and having that public phone number. This story of the Gabonese dog man actually came through a connection with the comic book artist that I have. And he was the one that did the story, that did the comic book Siege of Lock and Ranch. And so he started actually showing people the comic book because I sent them some books for free. He started showing some of his friends the comic books. And next thing you know, they start talking about, hey, man, I got a family member in Gabon that has seen this thing. And so next thing you know, I'm talking to people about the dog man encounters there. So
Damn, damn. And I can't wait for your album. That's for damn sure. And I will be here on Halloween. I'm gonna have to pay attention to what you're doing on that same day. That's for damn sure.
yeah, and the way I promote those albums is that day I'll drop. I probably drop 3 or 4 of the stories that are free for people to listen to. And what it'll do is it'll come out on YouTube. There'll be a link. You click, you go back, you pop to the website and listen. And one of the Gabonese Dogman stories is going to be one of those. There's the Gabonese Dogman story, and then there's a Mayan Dogman story. It's not a Mayan, but it was happened around some Mayan ruins. So you'll be able to listen to at least one of those, and you're welcome to play it on the show if you want to. I don't care.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, thank you. And everybody in the chat, I want to thank you. And again, I want to thank you for my super chats to Justin T and Rolf Pfeiffer Muller. And with that being said, Pam Brettenberg, thank you for the artwork. And everybody else who's been in the chat, and for those of you who are listening and viewing this, and for having an open mind. Remember, information, I always say, is the best commodity that you can get. The only thing you could really give to somebody, aside from love, is information. That's the most valuable piece. That's the one thing that No matter how much money you have, information can change everything. Information can make you better, information can make you more aware, and information can open your mind. With that being said, folks, get ready for Halloween. And as we wrap up, gearing up to Halloween, pay attention to Dark Waters. Now, me and Dark Waters are officially signing off.